I understood what was happening as I watched my sister's in-laws' house from far away. When I realized the truth, I was shocked. I wondered about the intentions of my sister's husband and his family towards her all this time. How many times had they tricked my sister with a straight face? It was unforgivable. No matter what, I was determined to make them pay. My name is Sally, and I'm 45 years old. When I tried to wear my funeral clothes again after a long time, I couldn't zip up the dress around my stomach. At first, I thought my body hadn't changed much, but it was obvious I'd gained some belly fat. The last time I wore this dress was when I was 30. My sister Jane, who had a weak heart since she was young, sadly passed away at 27 due to worsening pneumonia that led to heart failure. It's strange that I was the only one who spoke with Jane before she passed away. I happened to visit her in the hospital that day. Jane probably had many plans since she was only in her second year of marriage. She likely never thought she'd leave this world so soon. When I remember her smile as she talked about wanting to stroll under the autumn leaves after leaving the hospital, it breaks my heart. On the day of Jane's funeral, when I couldn't come to terms with her tragic death, something happened. Just before the ceremony started, I went to the restroom. There, I saw Jane's husband Bob talking on the phone in the nearby lounge. Yeah, once the funeral is done and Christmas rolls around, things should settle down a bit. Yeah, you're right. No, we should keep a low profile until the memorial mass about a year later. I don't usually listen in on people's phone calls, but this time I couldn't help but be curious about what they were saying. What does he mean by keep a low profile until the memorial mass about a year later? The deceased, he must mean Jane, right? The way Bob is talking, it doesn't sound like he's talking to a colleague. All of Jane's family is here at the ceremony. Who could he be talking to? Sorry for keeping you waiting. Yeah, I get it. No, the kid's fine. They don't suspect a thing. Neither my wife nor anyone in her family has noticed I have a child. Just stay home and relax. What? I was shocked. Did he just say he has a child? For the record, Jane and Bob didn't have any children. They decided not to because it was uncertain if Jane's body could handle childbirth. They were both in their first marriages, and we never heard anything about Bob having a child. What's happening? Honestly, Bob's strange conversation left me confused and overwhelmed with thoughts. But suddenly, I remembered the words Jane desperately tried to tell me just before she went into surgery. There's a child at home. After Jane lost consciousness and passed away a few days later without waking up, I never got to hear the rest of what she wanted to say. I was the only one who heard those words. The shock of losing Jane was so huge that I didn't have time to think about what she meant. But when I connected Jane's words about home with what Bob said about stay at home in their old house, which Sally wouldn't call their parents' house, just home. But there were no children in our family home either. After a bit of thinking, it hit me all of a sudden. Could it be that the child Bob was talking about on the phone is living at Bob's parents' house? When that idea came to mind, I couldn't sit still. If that were true, I don't think I could forgive Bob. After paying my respects at Jane's memorial service, I was eager to test my theory. I left the funeral home right away and went straight to Bob's parents' house. It's within walking distance from Jane and Bob's place. Bob is an only child, and his parents are getting older, so they decided to live close by. Jane had worries about living so close to her in-laws, wondering if she could get along with them better. But in reality, they hardly ever went back there and had very little family interaction. Maybe that's why even at Jane's funeral, Bob's parents didn't seem too upset about what happened. Instead, they seemed more interested in playing with their phones, which I found kind of strange. Well, I guess this is what happens when the relationship with in-laws is so distant. At least they could pretend to be more sympathetic at a time like this. Remembering how Bob's parents behaved, I finally reached Bob's parents' house. I hesitated to ring the doorbell. Everyone should be at Jane's funeral, so there shouldn't be anyone home. But what if someone did answer the door? What would I say? I still didn't have any proof of Bob's wrongdoing, and I wasn't confident about confronting someone without evidence. As I thought about this, I went around to the back of the house and peeked inside through a window that wasn't closed. I could see the whole room. Could someone really be in there? Just as my heart skipped a beat. Hey, stop moving. Look, stay still. Yeah. A child ran out into the yard, followed by a woman I didn't recognize. I instinctively hid and watched them from the shadows. The child looked a lot like Bob, with wobbly steps indicating he'd just started walking a few months ago. The woman seemed to be around Bob's age, and her eyes resembled the child's, making me certain she was the mother. Oh God, did Bob really cheat on my sister? When did this betrayal start? When did Jane find out? Even though my suspicions seemed to fit together perfectly, I had so many questions and didn't feel any better. Instead, tears started to well up. I'll never forgive him. I promised myself to make him pay for what he did to my sister. Later, I went back to the funeral home and attended Jane's burial in the churchyard. Even though everyone thought I left halfway through, when I explained that I couldn't handle the shock of losing Jane, they seemed to understand. I highly doubt anyone would suspect I went to Bob's house, but I was relieved that my sister's in-laws didn't seem to notice anything strange at all. The next day, I made up my mind to ask for a private investigation on Bob from the only detective agency in town. To my surprise, it was run by Jane's friend Layla, whom I remembered from the funeral. Layla told me that Jane had also asked for an investigation on her husband. After she requested the investigation, Jane got sick and passed away. Even though I have to keep things confidential, I think Jane would have wanted you to know, Layla said. With that, Layla shared the details and findings of the investigation Jane had requested. Once, even though they were engaged, Jane and Bob almost broke up. Bob got cold feet just 6 months before their wedding, saying he wasn't sure he could protect Jane, who had a weak heart, and he wanted some space. After a lot of thinking, Jane agreed and decided to distance herself from Bob. However, about 2 months later, Bob apologized and said he wanted to marry Jane after all, so they patched things up and went ahead with the wedding. After that, Bob worked really hard, even on his days off, because he wanted to buy Jane a house in the future. Jane talked about their relationship like everything was fine, like she was proud of it, so I thought they were okay. But I was wrong, Layla explained. In reality, right after getting engaged to Jane, Bob started having an affair with his childhood friend Nancy. They had dated before but broke up over a small disagreement. Even though Bob met Jane and got engaged, he still had feelings for Nancy. When Nancy reached out to him, those old feelings came back. To make matters worse, Bob's excuse about getting cold feet was a lie. Around the same time, Nancy got pregnant, and Bob was torn about whether to leave Jane and marry her. He even talked about it with some friends, but Nancy was firm in her decision. "If you stay with me, I won't ask you to marry me. But I'm going to have this baby," Nancy told Bob. Bob didn't want to break up with Nancy, but he also didn't want to tell his wife Jane about the baby. At the same time, he couldn't ignore a child he might have with someone he cared about. He didn't want Nancy to have the baby, but she was determined to keep it. Eventually, Bob opened up to his parents about the situation, only for them to say, "This will be our first grandchild, so let her have the baby." Bob's parents had always preferred Nancy as his partner since they knew her well from childhood. Plus, they didn't seem to like Jane much because she was frail and might not give them a grandchild, which they often complained about to others. Fortunately, Jane is frail, and she won't last long. Once she's gone, acknowledge the child and marry Nancy, Bob's parents proposed, and Nancy agreed. Though it was a twisted plan, it appealed to Bob. If his parents say so, then it must be okay, he thought. So it was decided that Nancy would have the child. Nancy, like Bob, was an only child, and her parents had already passed away. That's why Bob's parents spent a lot of time at Nancy's house, helping her during her pregnancy. The story about Bob working hard for Jane right after their wedding was a lie. He was probably visiting his newborn baby during that time. There were witnesses who saw Bob going to Nancy's house often, Layla explained. This suggests that the excuse of moving closer to their elderly parents was also a lie. They actually wanted to be near the child. As the child grew up, they respected Bob's parents' wish to spend more time with their grandchild, so Nancy and the child stayed more often at their house. With various excuses, they kept Jane away from her in-laws, and eventually, they stopped going home altogether. It's enraging how they're endorsing infidelity as a family, Layla concluded. Just a month ago, my sister found out about Bob's cheating. She was feeling sick and left work early, probably not realizing that Jane was home. Bob, who hardly ever texted or called when Jane was around, came home earlier than usual that day and apparently made a call somewhere. "I got off work early. Can I come over now?" "My wife? She's at work. I don't think she'll find out. She seems to be getting sick a lot lately and might go to sleep early. If I say I'm working late, I think I can stay longer with you," Bob said. "Yeah, I also want to live with Nancy and the kids soon. Every time she says she's not feeling well. I think she won't last much longer, replied the other person. Yay, I'm looking forward to it every time. Just imagining how Jane felt hearing that from her sickbed makes my heart ache. This incident made Jane aware of Bob's cheating, and she seemed to have hired a private investigator who happened to be her friend Layla. The investigation revealed everything, and just as Jane was about to confront Bob with a divorce, she collapsed and passed away. As Layla finished telling me all this, she lowered her gaze and said, "Jane must have been heartbroken." I couldn't agree more. I wanted to avenge Jane's pain. I couldn't bear the thought of Bob and his parents enjoying having a grandchild while Bob planned to remarry. But I've only just learned all this, and I don't know what to do. After thinking for a while, I had an idea. "Layla, are you good with computers?" At my words, Layla smiled and said, "I got this." The next day, I went to my sister's in-law's house. When I rang the doorbell, my sister's mother-in-law appeared on the monitor, looking surprised to see me. "Oh, Sally, what's going on?" she asked, sounding a bit anxious. "I need to talk to the family about Jane's things. Can we talk for a moment?" Hearing my request, my sister's mother-in-law fell silent, and the intercom went quiet. Oh no, maybe she won't let me in. Feeling nervous, I waited for a while. And then Bob appeared, saying, "I'm sorry, Sally. The room was messy, so I had to tidy up a bit. Please come in." "Oh, Bob, you're here. Perfect timing," I said with a smile. Bob's expression stiffened. He probably thinks I haven't figured out his cheating yet. His face stiffened, likely because he's hiding something. In fact, I had just seen his mistress and their child through the window. I bet he was cleaning up after them. I wonder which room they're in. Bob and my sister's in-laws seemed uneasy as they watched me enter the room. As soon as I took a sip of the tea they served me, Bob asked, "What's this about Jane's belongings?" Yeah. It's about this," I said, laying out a photograph on the table. Bob and his parents froze as they looked at the photo. "Bob, who is this woman?" I asked. "I don't know her," Bob replied hastily. In the photo, Bob and a woman were in bed together. The other day, this was sent to our house. It said that Bob is having an affair, I explained. Hearing this, his parents glared at Bob, and Bob shook his head frantically. "Wait, I don't remember this photo," he shouted. Ignoring his protests, I laid out more photographs. Each one showed Bob and the same woman kissing or on a date at a nearby amusement park. "People who cheat don't usually admit to their memory lapses, do they?" I said, feeling the tension rise. "I'm used to it," my sister's mother-in-law sharply retorted. "What are you implying, young lady?" "No. Mom, you've got it all wrong." "I don't know anything about this," Bob protested. "Then what's this picture about?" Even though you have a child with Nancy, I immediately responded to my sister's mother-in-law's words. My sister's father-in-law looked guilty and said, "Oh, you mean this child? And is this woman Nancy?" I asked, showing a photograph of Bob holding a child. "What?" The entire in-law family was speechless, and even though Bob kept denying the accusation, my sister's mother-in-law slapped him, calling him a worthless son. "Do you have other children too?" she demanded. "Please listen to me, Mom, Dad," Bob pleaded. But my sister's in-laws ignored Bob's pleas, scolding him for betraying their beloved grandchild. "What nonsense bringing this here?" The picture was sent to her house. "I don't know much about it either," Bob exclaimed. "I came here seeking clarity, but it seems Bob does have a child," I said, preparing for a confrontation. Bob was at a loss for words. But honestly, Bob was telling the truth. He doesn't have any other affair besides Nancy. I didn't plan to reveal this, as I didn't want to be accused of spreading false information later on. However, this picture is fake. It's a composite one that I had Layla create. I could have used a real picture of the child with the actual person Bob cheated with, but I chose a combined photo because of certain reasons. I planned to confront him by asking him about the child, but luckily, my sister's mother-in-law revealed the truth earlier than I expected. "So, your quietness means it's true, isn't it? Earlier, your mom also mentioned something about a child and Nancy," I said while my sisters-in-law stayed still where they were. The note that came with the picture said these kids are being looked after in this house. "That's not true." My sister's mother-in-law quickly disagreed with what I said. "Are you sure?" "Of course, it's not true." "Then show me all the rooms." Huh? Without waiting for their approval, I stood up from my seat and headed towards the room next door. Hey, wait a minute. You can't just snoop around other people's houses. Bob raised his voice. If there's nothing to hide, then you should show me. That's not the point. Then what's the issue? Well, without waiting for Bob's response, I ignored the attempts of my sister's in-laws to stop me and peeked into the next room. She's not here, I concluded, and then I went upstairs to the second floor. Despite facing obstacles and scraping my knee, it was nothing compared to my sister's pain. I was willing to endure any number of fresh wounds. Pushing past my sister's in-laws, I opened the door to the room on the second floor, pushing Bob aside as I did so. Ah, there she is. In the room, Nancy and a child were sitting on the bed. Well, who do we have here? It was a different woman and child from the ones in the picture. What's happening? Bob asked. At my words, Bob turned pale, and Nancy looked puzzled, saying, "A picture?" Yes, it seems like Bob here has been cheating while my sister was around. Look at this picture. As I showed the fake photo to Nancy, her face twisted in anger, and she crumpled the picture. What is this? You were with another woman. No, Nancy, it's not like that. Just listen. Nancy was furious, and Bob looked pale. Having gotten the proof I needed, I'd added, "So you were indeed involved with Bob, huh?" My sister's in-laws were stunned, unable to believe what was happening. Why? You told me I was the only one. You said we didn't have to get married, and I wanted to have a child and be with you. And now this. Nancy, there must be some mistake. Maybe it's a look-alike or Photoshop. What do you mean, maybe? You can't deny it completely. I can't trust you anymore. For a moment, I was surprised by the mention of Photoshop, but since Bob was too flustered to deny it properly, Nancy's suspicions were at their peak. A man who's so unsure of himself, you'd be better off not trusting him. He ruined my sister's life, I said, offering my serious advice. Nancy's face hardened. My sister went through a lot because of him, but she probably understands that already. I don't need to say anything, I thought to myself. Now, I need to act like I'm on Nancy's side and get her to listen to me to achieve my goal of not letting any of Bob's family or Nancy be happy. I understand, Nancy muttered. Wait, Nancy, I'm serious about you, I interrupted Bob's desperate attempt to win Nancy over. So you weren't serious about my sister, but you told her you were, even made marriage vows to her. Looks like you really are an untrustworthy man, Bob, I said. At my words, Nancy's face darkened. With a fake photo and everything, she seemed to start doubting whether Bob's words were sincere. Good. If you were serious, you wouldn't be cheating from the beginning. No matter what, you should stick to one person, I emphasized. As I stressed my point, Nancy's expression grew even darker. Bob's face turned ghostly pale. He must have sensed the growing distance in Nancy's feelings. We should break up, Bob. I don't want to be your backup option. After seeing that photo, I can't trust you anymore. I could handle being the other woman, but I can't stand the thought of being the third one, Nancy declared, tears flowing down her cheeks. Bob instinctively reached for her hand and pleaded, "Please, just listen to me." But Nancy pulled away, stating firmly, "I don't need to acknowledge the child anymore. Just leave me alone." As Nancy left the house with her child, Bob's entire family was saddened by the loss of both the child and the planned second wife. Meanwhile, I felt a sense of victory inside. Later, I had Bob write a legal document officially ending his ties with our family, cutting off all connections. Additionally, he agreed to relinquish any rights he had to the inheritance left by my sister. My father, who is usually quite stern, heard everything from me and stormed into my sister's in-laws' home. They were shocked by his sudden appearance and seemed to agree to renounce any claim to the inheritance, wanting to sever ties with our family completely. Well, even though we call it my sister's inheritance, it wasn't much. But it's a relief that not a single cent of her assets went to him, I thought. On the day I brought the photos to Bob's house, it seems one of the windows was open. As a result, our argument and conversation could be heard clearly outside, along with revelations from Nancy's friend who lived nearby. Everything that happened in Bob's house was exposed to the entire neighborhood. As a result, rumors spread that Bob's house was cursed, and he decided to quit his job and leave town with his parents. Meanwhile, Nancy unexpectedly showed up at our family home after about 2 months. She came bearing $50,000 as a gesture of apology and gratitude for helping her see the truth. She wanted to make amends for how she had treated my sister. While I appreciated Nancy's intentions, money couldn't erase the pain my sister had endured. It didn't feel right for us to forgive someone for something they themselves couldn't forgive just because they offered money. We understood Nancy's gratitude, but we couldn't accept money from someone who had done such a shameful thing, so I declined to accept the money. Instead, we suggested that it be donated to a nearby children's home where my sister used to work. Do you doubt whether such a woman would actually follow through with the donation? Of course not. I went with her to ensure the donation was made properly, so you can trust that it happened. If the money is used for that purpose, I believe my sister would be happy. I hope the children who have their whole lives ahead of them can find happiness, even on behalf of my sister. As for myself, it's hard to admit, but I struggled with the loss of my sister for a while, even experiencing mental health challenges. There was a time when it was so tough that I had to leave my job. But I've been gradually recovering, and now I work at Layla's detective agency. Leela and I became very close after that incident. I think it's because we were both comrades who had lost something important in such a tragic way. We found common ground. Although I didn't have a positive view of marriage because of what happened to my sister after being with my partner for 4 years, we got married last year. The experience of losing my sister during the COVID-19 pandemic made me realize that I never know when I might lose the chance to be with my loved ones. So I decided to get married. I want to cherish every moment with those I care about, without any regrets. Just watch me, Jane. I promise to live a long, fulfilling life for both of us. When I join you someday, we'll have a blast together, I declared, determined to live life to the fullest.
If Henry's health check shows any issues, I'll support him to get back to normal levels. If his salt intake is too high, I'll come up with low-sodium recipes. If he's drinking too much and staying up late, I'll encourage him to go to bed early. It's all because I, as his wife, have a sincere wish for Henry to live a long life. And yet, my husband Henry laughed at me, holding up his smartphone camera while I was suffering and exhausted. Could you forgive such a horrible spouse? I'm Emma. I'm 62, and my grandchildren are my pride and joy. After watching the morning news until 8:30, I clean the house and do the laundry before starting my work in the office. This has been my routine for nearly 40 years. Henry, who is 3 years older than me, runs his own business, and I handle the office and accounting work. Henry's motto is to work for life, and ever since we got married, he's been working tirelessly without weekends, work, and more work. Work seems to be his lifeblood. When our kids were little, I often wished he would spend more time with them instead of me taking care of them alone, like what we now call solo parenting. We hardly ever went on family trips, and the only trip I can remember is a 3-night stay in Anchorage for a relative's wedding. Now, our daughter and son are over 30, have their own families, and are doing well. Our grandchildren are adorable. But I still want to go on a long trip with Henry at least once more in my life. I've mentioned it to him on his 50th birthday and our 30th wedding anniversary, but Henry just brushes it off, saying, maybe someday, without seriously considering it. Our daughter Mia often invites me, saying, let's go on a trip with my family. But I feel guilty about leaving Henry behind working and going on an overnight trip. So, I end up enjoying day trips with my friends from the neighborhood and spending the rest of my days cooking for Henry while using a calculator for our finances. One day, Henry was diagnosed with high blood pressure during a health checkup. Henry loves sweets and salty foods, and he's been borderline diabetic since his 50s. Now, he also has high blood pressure. The doctor warned us that the combination of diabetes and high blood pressure could worsen kidney and retinal problems, and that we should review our lifestyle. I was terrified. But Henry didn't care and kept eating anchovies while downing beer. Hey Henry, the doctor said we should start watching our salt and sugar intake. Doctors always exaggerate. I've lived this way for 65 years, and changing now won't make much of a difference. But Mr. Davis next door, who's about your age, was hospitalized for heart disease last month. We need to be careful. He smokes too. I only eat and drink, so I'll be fine. But Henry, your waistline has grown significantly recently. What? Yes, Henry's triglycerides are also high. Diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, the so-called lifestyle diseases. In Henry's case, it's due to drinking, eating habits, and lack of exercise. He used to be slim and handsome, but since his 40s, he's gained a lot of weight around his waist, and in the past 6 months, it seems to have grown even more. Henry is aware of it and hates it when I point it out. Shut up! I'd rather die happy eating what I like than live long depriving myself. That may be true, but I want you to live a long life. Oh, shut up! Shut up! You're ruining my drink! Henry's loud voice drowned out my lecture, and he waved his hand as if shooing away a fly. Then he turned up the TV volume and ignored me while he bit into some cheese. Whenever I worry about his health, this is what happens. I just want to live a long life with Henry, but I can't tell if he's overconfident about his health or just pretending not to care. Still, I couldn't help but worry about Henry's diagnosis and the doctor's words, so I decided to prepare meals with less salt and sugar. No taste. The next day at lunch, Henry frowned as he sipped the vegetable soup I had reduced the salt in. I used less salt than usual. What? Instead, I made the broth carefully from vegetables and chicken bones. Doesn't it smell good? Henry silently added salt to the vegetable soup. Henry, what are you doing? Vegetable soup without salt is just muddy water. Give me white bread too. But rye bread makes you chew more, so you feel fuller. I don't want to fill my stomach with hard bread. If you can't make it, I'll get pizza. Henry! Henry didn't touch anything else besides the vegetable soup and quickly stood up and left the house. Even after that, I tried to reduce Henry's salt and sugar intake, but he stubbornly refused, and our mealtimes were tense. This bad atmosphere affected our daily lives, and even Mia, who visited with her grandchildren, sighed. Dad, you should appreciate Mom more. Some wives wish their husbands would die sooner. You're lucky. Shut up. Even his own daughter's advice didn't reach Henry. Really? Mom, you should just ignore him. He won't change until his diabetes gets worse, and he goes blind or something. But anyway, Mom, aren't you going to eat these cookies? They're from your favorite store. Oh, thank you. But I haven't had much of an appetite lately. What? Are you okay? My daughter's eyes widened. Actually, for a while now, I haven't been hungry, and even watching gourmet shows doesn't make me want to eat. Is it the stress from worrying about Henry's diet? If I said that, my daughter's eyes would narrow, so I gave a vague answer. Maybe it's because this summer is so hot. Amelia, do you want to eat Grandma's share too? Yes. My granddaughter Amelia's eyes lit up as she climbed onto my lap and started eating the cookie. And now, that will be too much for her. Mom, don't reduce your food intake just because you don't have an appetite. What if you get sick before Dad? You're right. Thank God. I was grateful for my daughter's genuine concern as I patted my sweaty, damp granddaughter's head. At that time, I really thought the loss of appetite was due to stress or the summer heat affecting my health. I never imagined that such a serious illness was lurking. The days of having no appetite continued, and even cooking became a chore. Still, hoping for Henry's health, I held the knife desperately while suppressing my nausea. Sometimes Henry ate reluctantly, but other times he got angry, saying he couldn't eat this, and went out to eat. I felt tears welling up at the unreasonable treatment of the food I had made with my tired body, but even so, I kept looking for recipes with reduced salt and sugar for Henry and continued to cook for him. Then one day, "Hey, aren't you getting rounder lately? Huh?" As I sat idly watching TV in the living room, I could feel Henry staring intensely at my body. Feeling annoyed by his rude gaze, I also noticed that something was off with my body. Actually, my pants haven't been fitting lately. I sighed while rubbing my swollen belly. For the past month or so, even though I had no appetite, my body hadn't lost weight. Instead, my legs and stomach had swelled. Seeing this, Henry's eyes gleamed. "Hey, you keep nagging me, but you're the one who's been unhealthy." "That's not true. You're probably sneaking good food while feeding me tasteless meals, right?" Henry had a puzzled look on his face, but seemed pleased as he complained. Maybe he felt proud of his observation. "I'm not eating anything special. You know I can barely eat regular meals." "That's exactly why you're hiding good food. Pretending to be a good wife while being a strict one just towards me." "It's not true." I wanted to fight back, but my body was too weary and my mind too sluggish. "I feel like something's wrong with my body. I might be sick." "It's probably the same lifestyle disease as mine. After preaching to me, you end up with it yourself. How ironic." "Yeah. Could this be a lifestyle disease?" I didn't know. But I knew for sure that my body was signaling for help. It was Friday night. I planned to visit my regular doctor after the weekend. But by the next evening, my fatigue and shortness of breath worsened, and I couldn't get out of bed. Something was wrong. Something was definitely wrong. Gaining weight shouldn't make it this hard to breathe. I wanted to go to the hospital, but I didn't feel capable of driving myself. After 6 p.m., when Henry returned from work, I struggled to approach him, leaning against the wall. "Henry, I'm sorry, but could you take me to the emergency room? My stomach, it's hard to breathe." Seeing me clutching my belly, Henry was stunned. Then he burst into laughter. "Take you to the emergency room because your belly's big? That's ridiculous." "Please." "No way! It's embarrassing. Do you want the ER to tell you you're just overweight? The ER is for emergencies only. Be reasonable." I knew that. But this discomfort couldn't just be from gaining weight. Even if my eyes pleaded, Henry showed no sign of taking me to the hospital. So, I resorted to calling 911. If it turned out to be just weight gain, I'd be really sorry. When I told Henry I'd called an ambulance, he scoffed and took photos with his smartphone. Maybe he wanted to laugh later about his wife calling an ambulance for being overweight. I felt utterly disillusioned with Henry, whom I'd cherished and served for years. But if it meant relieving this suffering, I didn't care about Henry. When the paramedics arrived, Henry scratched his head with a half-smile, saying his wife was being dramatic. However, the paramedics ignored Henry, measured my oxygen levels, and gently spoke to me. "Your levels are quite low. It must have been tough. You'll feel better with some oxygen." "Oh. Huh?" Tears welled up at the paramedics' kind words. Henry stood there, dumbfounded. The paramedics quickly gave him instructions, and I was taken to the ambulance, feeling both relieved and losing consciousness. Later, at the hospital, emergency treatment alleviated my breathing difficulty. Both Henry and I thought I had just gained weight, but we were wrong. The swelling in my hands and face was edema, and my abdomen was filled with fluid. I was shocked, but at the same time, I felt a sense of inevitability. Henry has been dumbfounded since the ambulance arrived. Naturally, I was admitted to the hospital immediately and underwent a thorough examination. Henry seemed completely unreliable, so I felt bad for Mia, who had her own family, but I decided to leave the hospital preparations and household matters to her. Then, on Monday, after all the tests were completed, my disease was given a name. Since it caused ascites to accumulate, it wasn't a mild condition. Depending on the progression of the disease, it might even come with a prognosis. Henry, who was listening to the doctor's diagnosis next to me, kept his head down, his expression unreadable. Was he regretting laughing at me for being fat when I was actually sick? Or was he finally realizing that he could end up in a dangerous condition like mine due to his own diabetes and high blood pressure? Maybe he was disappointed that I had become useless now that I was ill. If that's the case, I should divorce him. I don't want to spend the last part of my life being insulted. I pondered such things absent-mindedly as I listened to the doctor's words. Then suddenly, Henry stood up and slammed something he had taken out of his pocket onto the desk. The doctor and I were, of course, stunned. When I looked at what he had slammed down, I saw it was Henry's driver's license. I was even more confused. Henry shouted at us, who were still in shock. "I'm giving my liver to my wife! So save her!" "What? Look, I checked the donor box. This way, I can give my organs to my wife, right?" Henry grabbed his driver's license and held it up close to the doctor's face. I was bewildered by Henry's unexpected statement, but I quickly grabbed his arm. "Henry, wait! That's rude to the doctor. Please! You're a doctor who's smarter than I am, right? Do something!" With my health deteriorating and feeling weak, I couldn't restrain the much larger Henry. 2 nurses stepped in between us, and the doctor backed away in his chair. Though the doctor showed a moment of agitation, he quickly regained his composure and spoke calmly to Henry. "Please calm down." "How can I be calm?" Noticing the trembling in the arm I had grasped, I was at a loss for words. When I looked up at Henry's face, his distorted mouth was quivering. In nearly 40 years together, I had never seen this expression on him. Not when our children were born, not when our daughter got married, never. "I understand how much you care about Emma, but a liver transplant also places a significant burden on the donor." "I don't care." "Additionally, we can only perform a transplant with a healthy liver." "Henry, do you have confidence in your health? Are you free from liver disease, high blood pressure, or diabetes?" "Well..." Henry's face turned pale, and he looked restless. Seeing this, the doctor let out a small sigh. "I will do my best to treat Emma. Please, Henry, support her emotionally and physically." Henry collapsed into a chair, looking utterly defeated. I was completely bewildered by this sight. I couldn't reconcile this image with the man who had been pleased by my weight gain and never showed a shred of concern. Afterward, Henry followed me to my hospital room, looking more unsteady than the sick person, and slumped into a chair with a look of utter despair. I couldn't help but murmur, "Have you finally understood how worried I was about your health?" At my sarcastic question, Henry looked up in surprise. "I didn't want you to realize it this way, you know." Forcing a smile, I looked at Henry as he opened his mouth to say something. But no words came out, and he just stood there, holding his head in his hands. After a moment, Henry muttered that he would come back tomorrow and left the hospital room with his shoulders slumped. Watching his retreating figure, always so proud and upright, filled me with a mix of emotions I couldn't quite define. Was he shocked? Maybe the thought of his wife being in a life-threatening situation, severe enough to consider giving up his own organ. Or was it just guilt? Perhaps the fear that he might face the same fate one day. I didn't know, but I felt like I had avenged myself on Henry for all his past actions by putting my life on the line. After that, I went through various tests, discussed the causes and future of my illness with the doctors, and continued my treatment. Henry participated in these discussions too, but he was stunned to hear that there was no fundamental cure for my condition, that it could only be managed with palliative care, and that it could become malignant if it progressed. "Even your diabetes and high blood pressure are similar, Henry," I said, and he furrowed his brows and twisted his mouth. I was determined to live, so I listened carefully to the doctors and proactively sought advice from the dietitian. Henry attended the nutrition counseling sessions too, but he seemed completely lost. "What was that?" "It was all technical terms and too complicated. They should explain things in simpler terms that lay people can understand." The dietitian explained things very clearly. "It's just that you have so little interest or experience in cooking. You always said the kitchen was a woman's domain and never helped at all. And while I appreciate you bringing me my clothes every time, they're always wrinkled and it's a hassle. Are you managing the laundry okay?" My sarcastic comment made Henry, dressed in wrinkled clothes, choke on his words. Please try not to let the house fall apart until I get back. You should learn some household chores. I might leave before you do, you know. Don't even joke about that. Oh, you hate housework that much? Right, it's a woman's job after all. Henry glared at me with reddened eyes. But he said nothing more, placed the poorly folded laundry down, and left quietly. Until I was discharged, Henry didn't visit me at the hospital again. Maybe he was fed up with a wife who, once compliant and healthy, now constantly nagged him from her sickbed. When Mia came to exchange my clothes, I asked about Henry. Don't worry about Dad, Mom. It's his own fault, she replied curtly. My son Daniel, who visited on the weekend, also said, If it's too hard to live with Dad, Mom, you can come stay with us. My wife even agrees. I felt guilty towards Daniel's wife and couldn't accept the offer, but his words made me very happy. And then, as my symptoms stabilized and I was cleared for discharge, an expressionless Henry came to pick me up, and we went home. I wondered how much the house had deteriorated in Henry's hands, considering he couldn't do any housework. Garbage day was the day after tomorrow, so I needed to clean everything up by then. I'd also need to go grocery shopping later. Thinking about these things, I stood in front of our house for the first time in 10 days. And then, the living room, kitchen, and even the bathroom were surprisingly tidy. Of course, it's not perfect in every little detail, but there's no feeling that cleaning is needed right now. The refrigerator also had fresh vegetables and fish, making it seem like dinner could be made right away. Did Mia do this? I closed the refrigerator and called out to Henry. I did it. What? Henry? That controlling, work first Henry? As I stood there in amazement, Henry, looking irritated, pulled me out of the kitchen. He forcibly sat me down on the couch and told me to rest, then took my luggage to the bedroom. After putting away my luggage, he went upstairs, and 30 minutes later came down with folded laundry, making trips back and forth between the bedroom and the laundry room. In my 40 years of life, it was the first time I had seen Henry moving around so much in the house, so I couldn't take my eyes off him, feeling like I was watching some unknown creature. After finishing the laundry, he then stood in the kitchen and started boiling pasta. I stood up instinctively and peeked into the sink from beside him. What? You know how to boil pasta? Are you okay? Don't underestimate me. I can do this much. Henry pushed me aside, annoyed, and stirred the pasta. Oh no, if you stir it that hard, the water will overflow. I wanted to say something, but seeing Henry's serious face, I swallowed my words. It was like the day I first taught our daughter how to boil pasta. Without noticing my internal struggle, Henry set the timer for the pasta's boiling time and then opened the refrigerator without leaving the kitchen. He cut the vegetables with textbook precision, measured water with a measuring cup, and made vegetable soup. He then cut onions and tomatoes again with textbook precision, but struggled with cutting bacon. Watching this scene intently, I was told to go watch TV on the couch because I was being a nuisance. What he made was a light-colored vegetable soup, pasta, and salad. This isn't how it was supposed to turn out. Henry's face was clearly distorted with shock. I was more surprised that Henry had cooked than by the result, and I curiously started eating the pasta. The overcooked pasta was too soft with no firmness. The taste was even milder than what I usually make. The vegetables in the soup were too hard to chew, making sounds with every bite. The taste was, of course, bland. It wasn't something I could honestly say was delicious. If it were for the kids, I would simply say it was delicious, but saying that to Henry might hurt his pride. Wondering what to do, I chewed on the raw carrot. Then, Henry suddenly apologized. I'm sorry. What? Oh. The carrots are hard, but they can be eaten raw, so don't worry. The pasta is a bit overcooked, but it's fine. Not that. What? I'm really sorry for not taking you seriously until now, Emma. Oh. So that's what it was about. Distracted by seeing Henry doing housework, I had completely forgotten about my anger and resentment. While I wasn't bothered, Henry's face was deeply troubled. I always thought that a man's job was to earn money, and as a good earner, I was a good husband. I thought it was natural for women to support that and follow along quietly. Yeah, I couldn't stand being criticized for my health and food choices. As the one who takes the lead in this household, I believed I had the right to decide how I live or die. If it meant living a boring life by restricting my favorite foods, I'd rather eat what I love and die quickly. Yeah, but that was just an excuse. I never seriously imagined suffering from a real illness. I was convinced I would always stay healthy and keep working. So, everything you said or did felt like she was just being annoying. I see. I understand. We've been together for 40 years, after all. When you collapsed and your life was in danger, I finally realized you truly cared about my health. You just wanted me to live a long and healthy life. It wasn't until I was in the same position, praying for you to survive, that I understood. I was frustrated. They said my liver was useless. They said you might die, and I couldn't do anything. Henry's voice, his fingers, they were trembling slightly, as if he were terrified. I wanted to do something for you when you got out of the hospital, so I learned how to do housework for Mia, but this is the result. I realized the importance of everything you did for me. Henry rubbed his now wide forehead against the dining table. I'm truly sorry for everything. I'll do anything. If it means extending your life, I'll do anything. Please forgive me. It was a heartfelt apology. Henry was sincere, bearing his heart without any dishonesty. The bandaged fingers were proof of his efforts with unfamiliar cooking. The clean room and folded laundry were signs of his change. Henry was stubborn and narrow-minded, unable to see beyond what was right in front of him. After all this, forgiving him seemed like the right thing to do. But I shook my head. I won't forgive you. Emma! Henry's face lifted, his voice filled with despair as I spoke firmly. I'll never forgive you for what you did to me. I'll never forgive the face you made when you laughed at me for calling the ambulance. Just thinking about it, the pain and sadness of that time came rushing back, bringing tears to my eyes. Holding them back, I coldly recounted Henry's worst actions. Henry didn't argue. He seemed prepared to accept any condemnation. After expressing all my grievances, I took a breath. Henry looked as if he were ready to face a death sentence. Looking at his face, I delivered my verdict. I won't forgive you, but I accept your offer to help extend my life. What? Henry's eyes widened even more at my command. In order for me to live longer, eat balanced meals with me, walk every morning, avoid heavy drinking, and go to bed early. If you try hard, I'll fight against my illness. This was what I had always wished for from Henry. It was the dream I had longed for us to grow old together. Some might say I'm being too lenient, but this is my choice to live the rest of my life without regret. Emma. Henry's eyes filled with tears. But that doesn't mean I'm forgiving him. Our marriage is still on shaky ground. But I'm not the kind of person who can abandon someone who recognizes their mistakes and tries to change. So not for his sake, but as a way for me to live comfortably, I decided to give Henry one more chance. Since then, my life with Henry has completely changed. Henry handed over most of his CEO responsibilities to Daniel, the heir, and only handled technical matters that only he could do. I also transferred most of my work to Daniel's wife. We started waking up early every morning and taking a walk in the nearby park. I prepared breakfast and lunch, and Henry took on the task of preparing dinner. Originally a perfectionist and craftsman at heart, Henry wasn't satisfied just reading my low-sodium recipes. He bought a bunch of nutrition books and quickly became more of a health enthusiast than I was. He didn't even know what green leafy vegetables were, but now he insists on eating leafy, root, and fruit vegetables every day. He works hard to create dishes rich in vegetable flavors, even with low salt. Daniel and Mia, who visit us, are astonished by Henry's transformation. He even won over our previously indifferent grandchildren by making homemade potato chips, becoming a doting grandpa before we knew it. He's changed so much, it's kind of creepy. Mia, once wary of her stubborn father, was now taken aback. But seeing how much he cherished me, she seemed reassured. A year after my hospital discharge, Henry and I took our first trip alone together. I was so excited, taking pictures of everything from the hotel's exterior to the random decorations in our room, and Henry muttered in exasperation, "Act your age. I can't help it. Traveling with you has been a lifelong dream." I complained, and Henry's eyes widened. He quickly turned his head and walked to the edge of the hotel. "Henry?" Puzzled, I approached him and noticed his shoulders shaking. "Why are you crying on such a wonderful trip?" "Because you." "Let's not dwell on it. Let's enjoy ourselves, okay?" Giving up on the immobile Henry, I gazed out the large window. The sea was calm. It was like a painting. There was still time before dinner, so I thought about going for a little walk. If I found any pretty shells, they would make a perfect souvenir for Amelia. "Emma." "What?" He was suddenly standing next to me. "Thank you for being alive." Even though he wouldn't look me in the eye, Henry's heartfelt words made me laugh. Likewise. I prayed that I would always feel that the choice I made back then was the right one, even in my final moments. As if wishing for a new lifetime of happiness, I held Henry's bony hand for the first time in decades. I'm Emma and I am 29 years old this year. My husband Jake is the same age, and we've been married for 3 years. We have occasional quarrels, but we've always respected each other and got along. Both my husband and I work full-time. We were quite content with our jobs, but as our 3rd wedding anniversary was approaching, we started to consider having children. I'd decided to get married. Then, out of the blue, my brother suddenly announced. Not only I, but also my parents were taken aback by the sudden news. My brother, David, is 35. He works at a reputable company and is a sincere and kind older brother I'm proud of. However, he had never mentioned having a girlfriend before. Everyone was astonished when my brother, who has always been somewhat detached from the opposite sex, suddenly announced his own intention to marry. As we dug deeper into the story, we learned that his girlfriend of 6 months was pregnant, and they had decided to marry quickly. What's she like? She's lively and forthright. Well, since David is more of a laid-back type, maybe someone like her would be a better match. Our mother said with a chuckle, and our father nodded with a wry smile. Despite the surprise of a shotgun wedding, it was delightful news. They had already met her parents, and they asked us to meet her family soon. Can I come too? Of course. I'd appreciate it if you and Jake could come. David often visited my husband and me because they got along well. In fact, I think he enjoyed spending time with my husband more than me. I think Jake will be happy too. Congratulations on your wedding, brother. Thanks. David responded, blushing slightly as he smiled. His happiness seemed infectious, and I felt joy too. Then came the day of the meeting with the bride's family. We, my parents and us, a couple, were waiting in the hotel lobby. Sorry to keep you waiting. David arrived a little after the agreed-upon time, looking a bit flustered. A few minutes later, David's girlfriend and her parents arrived. Her name was Misty, who I had heard was 33, 2 years younger than my brother. In person, she looked even younger. Maybe it was because she was more beautiful and a bit flashier than I had imagined. My name is Misty. Nice to meet you, she said in a slightly nasal voice. Hearing her voice, my husband exclaimed, Huh? What's the matter? "No, it's nothing," he replied after some thought, shaking his head. Despite his odd behavior, the meeting went smoothly. My husband's unusual demeanor was worrisome, but I turned to Misty when addressed. "Emma, right? Let's get along, shall we?" "Yes, I hope we can be good friends too." With her warm smile, I found myself smiling back. Although I sensed something was off about my husband, I momentarily pushed that aside, relieved to see that my brother's wife-to-be seemed to be a pleasant person. However, I was soon to realize that my instinct about my husband was right. After their marriage registration, my brother announced they were planning to have a wedding ceremony. It was the fervent wish of his wife, he said. I understood their sentiment. It was a once-in-a-lifetime event. She was already pregnant, and my brother wanted to fulfill her wish, so they decided to hurry and hold the ceremony before her belly got too big. I was surprised when I heard they managed to secure a date for the ceremony a few months from now due to a cancellation. The couple decided to live in my brother's house, about an hour's drive from ours. One day, during a weekday off, the doorbell unexpectedly rang while I was home. "Hello there." Misty?" It was my brother's wife standing at the door. Aside from dropping off some items, she had never visited our house before. "I came to visit. You're off today, aren't you?" Leaving me bewildered, she boldly stepped into the house. I hurriedly followed her in, finding her curiously looking around the house. Is my brother?" "Of course he's at work. It's a weekday." That wasn't the point of my question. But she started talking before I could clarify. "I'm just bored at home." "You must be bored too, being home alone." "Hey, I'm thirsty. Can you make me some tea?" Feeling awkward, I went to prepare some tea, but when I came back, she had closed the windows and turned on the air conditioning. "Tea is not good during pregnancy, right?" "I'm sorry, I don't have any caffeine-free options at home, only mineral water." "Oh, well. It can't be helped." "Sorry." For some reason, I found myself apologizing as I handed her the mineral water. She sipped it, glancing around the room with a small smile on her face. "What a small house!" "Excuse me?" "Hey, I heard you guys didn't have a wedding, right?" I was taken aback by the abrupt change in topic. We got married almost 3 years ago, and yes, we never had a ceremony. When we were discussing a wedding after getting married, the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Luckily, we hadn't made any reservations yet. We had a long discussion, including whether we should have a ceremony at all, and in the end, we decided not to. Neither of us was particular about having a wedding, and we agreed to save the money for our future home instead. We explained this to both sets of parents and appeased them by agreeing to have wedding photos taken. Well, we weren't in a position to have one when we got married. But you still haven't had one, right? We decided together. Well, I guess you have to say that, don't you? She let out a dramatic sigh, resting her cheek in her hand. There was a slight smirk on her face. Poor thing. Not even having a wedding ceremony. She exaggeratedly declared that, not giving me a chance to retort. It's not that we couldn't have a wedding ceremony, but she didn't give me a chance to interject. So small a home, and no wedding ceremony. Have you had kids yet? Well, truly pitiful. But what else could we expect, looking at you? I thought I'd misheard. But after seeing Mysael's mocking grin, I realized she'd indeed uttered those words. Indeed, compared to Mysael, I wasn't especially beautiful. I wasn't gorgeous or cute, nothing to write home about. This was the first time anyone had belittled me to my face like this. After that, she often visited on my days off and kept belittling me. Looking at the glass in the kitchen, she'd comment, Truly a mess. But I suppose it can't be helped if you're busy at work, can it? And on days when I wasn't wearing makeup because I was off. Maybe you should wear makeup even on your days off? Well, even with makeup, there's only so much you can do. Maybe that's why your husband doesn't see you as a woman? Every time she saw my actions, my home, my appearance, she'd laugh triumphantly and make snide comments. It wasn't outright ridicule, but she belittled me with the pretense of sympathy. She was my brother's wife, and their wedding was just around the corner. I felt like I shouldn't escalate things, so I didn't say anything to my brother or my husband. However, the stress of being ridiculed repeatedly was overwhelming, and my husband began to worry about me more and more. You seem to have lost your appetite, and your complexion doesn't look good. Maybe you should see a doctor. My husband kept saying this, and although I pushed back at first, I finally gave in. I thought it was stress, but recently I've been feeling dizzy and my body won't accept food. I went to the hospital just in case, and I was in for a surprise. What's going on? Suddenly calling everyone together like this? My mother seemed uneasy because I had called my parents and my brother's family to our home. Looking at my mother's nervousness, my husband and I shared a small laugh. Actually, I'm pregnant. The first thing I thought when the doctor mentioned the possibility of pregnancy was, no way. I thought it was time to consider having children, but recently it was the last thing on my mind. What I thought was stress was actually morning sickness. He pregnant? Yes, I'm still in the early stages. Emma! Suddenly, my brother raised his voice and gave me and my husband next to me a strong hug. When I turned around in surprise, I saw that his eyes were filled with tears. Congratulations! I'm so happy, as if it were happening to me. Big brother. Seeing my brother's reaction made me tear up as well. My parents joined in crying, and afterwards we all shared a laugh. As we were all talking happily as a family, I suddenly felt a gaze on me. When I turned towards the gaze and gasped. My AITA was glaring at me with a scary expression. You know, Misty. After returning home, my husband started speaking with a hesitant look. I feel like she was glaring at you with a scary look. So my husband also saw her face. Afterwards, when my brother spoke to my AITA, she answered with a quickly constructed smile, so I thought I was the only one who saw it. Looking at my worried husband, I thought it might be better to keep quiet. Actually, ever since my brother got married, his wife often came over unannounced. And each time, she continued to make snide remarks. As I choked on my words, recalling the emotions of those moments, my husband quietly listened. So, I want to keep a distance for a while. I think I should keep my distance too. Yeah, but she might come over to our house all of a sudden. What should we do? What about going back to your parents' house for a while? My parents' house? Yeah, you've been struggling with morning sickness. Can you commute to work from there? If you do that, I'll feel relieved knowing you're at your parents' house. My husband reassures me, and I breathe a sigh of relief. We have no intention of telling my parents about this right now. I don't want to rain on the parade of my newlywed brother, and I don't want to blow this out of proportion. But, right now, I can use my morning sickness as an excuse to return home. Still, why is she attacking you so much? I have no idea. The first time I met her was at the pre-wedding meeting. The next time I met her, she was like that, and I really don't understand why. I feel like I've seen her before. Eh? Where? My husband had reacted strangely when we first met her. I can't be certain. Although he evades, he says he'd like to look into it if he can. A few days later, we were to learn a shocking truth. Back at my parents' house, my husband frequently visited, and there were no more attacks from my AITA. It was peaceful. Just as my morning sickness was calming down, and the wedding day arrived without a hitch. We were getting ready at home, later than my parents who had left early. When we were about to leave, my AITA called. "Ah, you've already prepared?" "Yes. We're about to head out." "Sorry. We don't have a seat for you." "Huh? My family and friends are coming today. I'd be embarrassed if they thought you were my family. So, don't come to the ceremony." "What?" "You might dress up, but you know, with a background like yours, expectations are low." She was laughing on the other end of the phone. "I'm the star of the day. You understand that, right? Does my brother know about this?" "Of course. He can't say no to me." "Understood. But I'd like to talk after the ceremony." "I'll consider it. Give me the gift later, okay?" She hung up after having her say. My husband was looking puzzled at me, standing in stunned silence. "Misty said it would be embarrassing if I came to the wedding, so don't come." Tears started flowing as I spoke, unable to hold back. "Are you serious?" "But it's my brother's wedding. And he agreed to it." As my husband comforted me by gently rubbing my back, he exhaled as if he had made up his mind. "Let's investigate the facts and talk to David properly. David is not the kind of person who would tell you not to come to the wedding." My husband seemed quite angry. "We also need to clarify that. It would be better for David as well." "I understand. Thank you." 1 week after the wedding, my AITA came alone to the restaurant I had called her to. "Huh?" She seemed surprised not just to see me there. And it's understandable. It wasn't just my husband and me. My parents, my brother, and even her own parents were all there. "Why?" "I didn't hear anything. Is there something going on today?" "Yes. You told me to hand over the gift, right?" "Really, it was a joke. Did you need to go to this extent?" "I have something to discuss before I hand it over." It seemed suspicious to her that no one else was speaking. Her gaze was frantically shifting around the room. "Misty, you worked for Sunrise Systems before your marriage, didn't you?" "And so what? Why did you quit?" "It's obvious, isn't it? I was getting married and having a baby. I thought my husband had accepted that, so why bring it up now?" "Accepted? I didn't say anything about her quitting, but to suddenly quit just because she's pregnant, without discussing it first." My brother sighed in exasperation. "But that's old news, right?" At that point, my husband chimed in. "Actually, Sunrise Systems, where she worked, is a client of my company. They're almost like a subsidiary, so we get quite a bit of inside information." "What?" Seemingly at a loss for words, my AITA fell silent as my husband spoke. "I thought she looked familiar. She had an affair with a married supervisor at her workplace, felt uncomfortable, and quit, right?" "That's..." "Weren't your parents aware of that as well?" As he looked at my silent in-laws, they let out a deep sigh. "We apologize." She cried and said she was forced into the relationship by her boss. We believed her. We're really sorry." "We thought it was all in the past." With heads bowed deeply, my AITA's parents apologized. "What the hell? I was forced by my boss. That's what I said. It's all in the past now." "Past?" At the sound of my brother's voice, low as a rumble of thunder, my AITA trembled. He sighed heavily and laid several photos out in front of everyone. "How are you going to explain these?" The photos showed my AITA and a middle-aged man arm in arm, entering a hotel together. I was shocked to hear from my sister and her husband after the wedding. that your affair with your old boss is still ongoing. Within only a week, my brother had gathered a lot of evidence. Right after the wedding, we consulted with my brother about my Sael, passing on all the information we had. We told him that we had been uninvited from the wedding, that she had been nasty to us long before that, and that she had quit her job due to an affair. My brother had been told by my Sael that I wasn't at the wedding because I had severe morning sickness. My brother apologized for everything she did, even though he had done nothing wrong. When I asked him what he was going to do, he said he would look into it himself. And a week later, when my brother told me he was ready, I called my Sael. My brother had called our parents and her parents here himself. This, everyone knows. That's why we called her here. As my Sael tried to snatch away the photos in panic, she froze in despair upon hearing those words. You've also been bullying my sister. Why? With a sullen look on her face, my Sael muttered. It's just, despite being so much less attractive than me, she looked so happy. Her family is so close-knit, too. She should be satisfied with that, but she even got pregnant, while I'm the one who should be the center of attention. So that's why you didn't invite her to the wedding? Of course. It's my wedding. It's strange to have someone else being congratulated. Everyone was at a loss for words at the sight of my Sael, who nonchalantly justified her actions. Let's divorce. No. Do you think you have the right to say no? But I have a baby. How are you going to take responsibility? She stood up, placed her hands on her stomach, and shouted. If it's my child, of course I'll continue to pay child support even after the divorce. If it's really my child. After that, my brother and his wife divorced. She put up quite a fuss, but given her actions leading to the divorce, it was clear she was at a disadvantage. No court proceedings were necessary. When she was told she'd be legally accountable for a reasonable sum of money if they went to court, she conceded for a smaller amount. After the child was born, a DNA test showed that my brother wasn't the father. Figures. My brother said, looking a bit pained. Because the child was born within 300 days of the divorce, by law, the child was considered to be David's, my brother. It's a bit of a hassle that parentage can't be denied without going through civil litigation, but with the DNA test results in hand, there's no need to worry. The ex-wife continued her relationship with her former boss unabashedly and was thoroughly chastised when the boss's wife found out. Apparently, this was the second time the wife found out. The first was when she quit her job, and now again when she decided to divorce. The first time, their parents had intervened, but after this incident, it seems she's been abandoned even by them. For some reason, the ex-wife has been contacting my brother for help, he mentioned in a tired voice. Nearly a year after that incident, the phone rang. Hello? What do you think you're doing? The ex-wife's shrill voice echoed in my ears. My husband looked at me in surprise as our child lay sleeping in the crib. The ex-Sael seemed out of sorts, frantic. It's your fault for never picking up, no matter how many times I've called. You've made me miserable, so I'm going to make you miserable too, she screamed over and over. Your current situation is your own making. Shut up! I won't be satisfied until you've gone through the same. If you keep playing dead, I'll burn down this entire apartment. I paled at the ex-wife's threats. My husband, who had been listening beside me, immediately reported it to the police. Then, the ex-wife was arrested. The police arrived in time to prevent arson, but since she couldn't get into our house, she had damaged our door and windows, seemingly caught in the act of vandalism. After that, fearing the ex-wife's stalking behavior, we decided to go ahead with our long-planned home build and moved there. We no longer live in the apartment the ex-wife knew about. That, at least, was a relief. We got busy with things like child rearing, but we're leading a lively and enjoyable life. My brother comes to visit and plays with our child. Apparently, my brother has someone he likes recently, and occasionally he consults with my husband and me, blushing a bit. "Let us meet her before you decide to get married this time, okay?" I joked, to which my brother responded with a wry smile, saying, "I'm counting on it." Oh, by the way, the baby I'm carrying is Jennifer's husband's child. When I asked my sister Nicole who the father was after she announced her pregnancy, I was shocked by her answer. "What, a child with Mark?" At that moment, my husband Mark put divorce papers on the table. "That's right. I should have married Nicole from the beginning instead of you, who can't have children." Our marriage hadn't been going well, so I surprisingly accepted the situation calmly. "I understand. I'll accept the divorce and cut all ties with both of you from now on." I completely cut ties with Mark, Nicole, and my parents. Several years passed, and I had remarried. At my son Ryan's first day of kindergarten, I unexpectedly ran into Nicole and her husband, whom I never wanted to see again. "So, you managed to remarry? Who would choose someone like you who can't have kids? Is that your husband's child? Must be nice to finally be a mother. Her husband must be a boring, introverted guy." Encountering them brought my mood down, but as the first day of kindergarten began and the children started entering, Nicole and her husband noticed a particular child and started causing a commotion. "Hey, isn't that child famous?" "Oh, yes. Let me introduce my family. You both should know them well." With that, I introduced my family and began the story that would bring Nicole and her husband to their lowest point. "My name is Jennifer. I'm 34 years old. I used to work at a modeling agency but became a housewife after getting married. I couldn't have children, so it was just me and my husband Mark. Before getting married, I worked at the modeling agency not as a model but as a manager for rising models. My sister Nicole was a model, and I was her manager until I quit to get married. I met Mark at the modeling agency. He was a fellow manager. Mark, 5 years older than me, was good at his job, and I often consulted him about my worries because of his seniority. He listened to my concerns sincerely, and we gradually grew closer. When we both became aware of our feelings, he asked me to go out with him. "Jennifer, let's stop being just colleagues and start dating." I was attracted to his older charm, so I naturally said yes. Being a manager was a busy job, but we made time for each other and enjoyed happy moments together. That's why it didn't take long for us to get married. I intended to continue working even after marrying Mark, but he insisted on being the sole breadwinner, so I resigned from my job. I didn't have much resistance to quitting because of the poor work environment. The agency where Mark and I worked was notorious in the industry for being a toxic workplace. I had been considering changing jobs, but my sister Nicole was scouted by the agency and joined as a model. I got scouted by Jennifer's modeling agency. I have no idea what to do, so can you be my manager, Jennifer? Got it. I'll support you fully, Nicole. That was how I ended up staying at the agency, wanting to protect and support Nicole. Our parents had very harsh personalities, so Nicole had always adored me since we were little. This was one reason why I didn't change jobs, but my desire to support Nicole was the strongest. However, after Nicole became a model and started gaining popularity, she began to look down on me. "Hey, Jennifer, what happened with the perfume I asked for?" "Oh, about that, it seems they're out of stock, but they're ordering more. It should arrive the day after tomorrow." "What? Are you kidding me? I want to use that perfume right now. I'll be more careful next time. I'm sorry. You're such an incompetent manager, Jennifer. She would say things loudly for others to hear, making me feel small. My colleagues were also concerned about Nicole's attitude, but I could only smile and say I was fine. Any attempt to reprimand Nicole would result in her becoming immediately unpleasant and acting even more maliciously. Just like a child throwing a tantrum. It became increasingly noticeable and troublesome. I thought she was stressed from the demands of being a model. So I tried my best to support her, but the verbal abuse from Nicole only increased my mental anguish. When I married Mark, I was able to escape from that pain. Moreover, after I quit my job, Mark took over as Nicole's manager, alleviating many of my worries. Thus, I decided to focus on household chores to support Mark, who was now managing Nicole and supporting our family. However, our happy life didn't last long. 8 years into our marriage, Mark's work caused him to come home late, and the distance between us grew. Jennifer, you have an easy life, don't you? You're just a housewife staying at home. Why are you saying that all of a sudden? You don't have to say it like that. Because it's true, right? You're just lounging around at home. I do take care of the housework, you know. And you were the one who wanted me to become a housewife. That's because I thought you'd get pregnant soon. But there's no sign of that happening, so you could at least do more around the house, right? Mark would say what he wanted and then retreat to the bedroom, claiming he was tired. Recently, his attitude had become cold, possibly due to my inability to conceive. But what am I supposed to do about it? Every day, I see him off to work, clean the house, do the laundry, prepare dinner, and wait for him to come home. I want to have children with Mark too. Even if it means a late pregnancy, I believe I can raise a child with him. He blames me for not having kids, but isn't it because he's not making an effort? As his cold demeanor continued, I felt my love for him waning. One day, after finishing all the housework and taking a break for lunch, I received a call from Nicole. It was rare for her to call me. I wondered if something had happened. I answered the phone, having a split second to think. A skill I retained from my years as a manager. Hello? Nicole, what's up? It's rare for you to call. Oh, Jennifer. You're quick to answer the phone. Oh, right. I'm pregnant. What, pregnant? What does she mean? Nicole is pregnant? She's busy with work, and I didn't know she was seeing anyone. Mark never mentioned Nicole dating anyone either. I started to wonder how she ended up pregnant. But regardless of the father, Nicole is my important sister. That's great. Jennifer, you haven't been able to have kids, but I got pregnant. Poor Mark, right? No kids with you. That has nothing to do with this. I tried to genuinely congratulate her, but her tone seemed to mock me. Nicole's words clearly looked down on my inability to conceive, and her tone was filled with a sense of superiority. Anyway, congratulations on your pregnancy. It's going to be tough, but hang in there. Thanks. Look forward to a cute baby. Got it. Well, I still have chores to do. I bit my tongue and congratulated her despite her jibes, using housework as an excuse to end the call. While her pregnancy was genuinely good news, her attitude bothered me. I was curious about the father's identity but decided to continue my usual routine, realizing there was no point in dwelling on it. A few days later, I received an invitation from my family to a dinner party to celebrate Nicole's pregnancy. On the day of the celebration, I arrived at the venue alone. It was a high-end hotel. Feeling out of place, I explained the situation to a waiter who approached me, and he promptly guided me to the restaurant. Inside the upscale restaurant, Mark, Nicole, and our parents were engaged in a lively conversation. When Mark and I got married, they didn't seem this close, but now they were getting along very well. More importantly, why was Mark here alone without me? Suppressing the urge to voice my frustrations, I approached the table. Well, Jennifer. How could you come here dressed so frumpily? Nicole sneered. It's Nicole's special day. You really show you're the less competent sister, added my mother. Mark, we're truly sorry for marrying you to such an unpresentable daughter, my father chimed in. The moment I arrived, I was met with condescending remarks from everyone present. My parents had always been harsh, but ever since Nicole became a successful model, they treated me with increasing disdain while showering Nicole with praise. It seemed she had been sending money to our parents, leading to their comfortable lifestyle and apparent favoritism towards her. I felt the need to maintain the pleasant atmosphere and decided to apologize. I've seen many models, so I try to stay fashionable. But maybe I missed the mark this time. I'm sorry. Not even close, Jennifer. You'll never make it as a woman like that. Exactly. Good clothes can make anyone look good, but not in your case. Nicole, on the other hand, looks amazing. She's our top model for a reason, the most beautiful in the world, Mark said. Oh, Mark, thank you. You really know me well. Praise makes me thrive. Nicole beamed. Mark often compared me to Nicole, putting me down while praising her excessively. Something felt off. Despite their manager-model relationship, they seemed unusually close. Something was wrong. With these doubts lingering in my mind, I ate quietly. As the party drew to a close, I decided to ask Nicole about the father of her child. Hey, Nicole. Who's the father of your baby? What are your plans for marriage and work? Nicole's response was shocking. Oh, I almost forgot to tell you. The father of my baby is your husband. What? What did you say? At that moment, Mark placed divorce papers on the table. That's right. I should have married Nicole from the start. Were you surprised, Jennifer? You never noticed. Nicole laughed. Joining them, my parents watched with a vile smile, enjoying the situation. You couldn't have children, so there's no issue with you separating from Mark, my father said. Yes, Nicole is pregnant now. It's best for you to step aside so Nicole and Mark can be together, my mother added. At that moment, everything became clear. Recently, Mark's late returns and the close proximity between Nicole and Mark during dinner started to make sense. Given the already strained relationship between us, I found myself surprisingly calm and accepting of the situation. I see. Understood. I accept the divorce and will cut all ties with you from now on. With that, I took the divorce papers and left the restaurant. I went straight to the local office and submitted the divorce papers, severing all ties with Mark, Nicole, and my parents. A few years later, having moved on from that awful past, I remarried a wonderful man. And we had a son named Ryan. Today was Ryan's first day of kindergarten. As Ryan entered the preschool, I sat in the parents' observation area. Suddenly, a couple walked in late, and to my dismay, it was Nicole and Mark. I tried to look away, but it was too late. Our eyes met, and Nicole and Mark approached me. Oh, Jennifer! What a coincidence! Wait, do you have a child? Yes, I do. A son. Wow, you managed to remarry. Who would want to be with someone who can't have children? Unless, is it Mark's child? Glad you finally became a mother. We have a son too. But considering someone chose Jennifer, her new husband must be a dull, introverted man. My mood plummeted at encountering the two people I least wanted to see on such a joyous day. But I ignored them and waited for the event to start. My new husband had work and would join us afterward. So I was alone for now. Nicole and Mark mocked this too, but I paid no attention. Finally, the kindergarten event began, and the children started to enter. Nicole and Mark hurried to their seats, and I eagerly searched for my son. Spotting a child who looked familiar, Nicole and Mark started to get excited. Look! Isn't that the popular child actor from TV? And his father is a famous actor too. I wonder if he's here today. He might be. We should introduce ourselves for Nicole's career. Yes. As soon as the event ends, let's go talk to them. Their constant chatter was annoying other parents. After the event, as children returned to their parents, I saw Nicole and Mark heading toward the child actor with their own child. Hey there, is your dad here? Oh, this is our son. Be friends with him, okay? We'd love to meet your mom too. Where is she? The child actor smiled brightly and pointed. Mom is over there, he said. Following the child's finger, I saw he was pointing directly at me. Wait, you must be joking. This has to be a mistake, right? Ignoring the shocked expressions on Nicole and Mark's faces, my son, no, the child actor, ran over to me. Welcome back, Ryan. Mom, those people are scary. I know, but it's okay. Ryan whispered to me, clearly frightened. It made sense. He was just a small child, and the aggressive approach from strangers would naturally be terrifying. As I comforted my son, Nicole and Mark suddenly changed their tune and tried to cozy up to us. I can't believe Jennifer's child is that famous child actor, which means Jennifer's husband must be. No way! Well, I guess I underestimated you, Jennifer. We've had our differences, but let's stay on good terms from now on. What nonsense are you talking about? I've cut ties with you too. I have no intention of rekindling any relationship now. What? We're trying to be nice, and this is the thanks we get. Seriously, don't get too full of yourself just because we're trying to be friendly. Their attempt to ingratiate themselves turned into anger when I dismissed them. But their words didn't faze me at all. I was relieved to realize that seeing Nicole and Mark again after all these years did not stir any emotions within me. Just then, a man stepped in to stop the commotion. What's all this noise about? Ah, Edward. Oh, right. Nicole, Mark, let me reintroduce you to my family, though you probably know them well. With that, I introduced my husband Edward, the actor, and our popular child actor son, Ryan. Upon realizing who they were, Nicole and Mark became even more deferential. I had previously confided in a few people in the industry about my strained relationship with Mark. Among all the people in my life, my current husband, Edward, was particularly attentive and empathetic. He even guessed that I might be a victim of infidelity based on the situation. Secretly harboring feelings for me, he would go so far as to declare that he would step in if necessary, showing how much he cared about me. As it turned out, he was right, and the affair was eventually exposed. When my divorce from Mark was finalized, he was there to support me through the sadness of realizing that Nicole had been unfaithful despite our already cold marriage. Moved by his genuine concern for me and his unwavering support during such a painful time, I found myself falling for him. After a few months of dating, we happily tied the knot. Our life together was wonderful, and I gave birth to Ryan, proving that I was not infertile as Mark had claimed. Understanding the situation, Edward addressed Nicole and Mark. I'm sorry, but could you two please come with me? Of course. We were just hoping to talk to you, Edward. Nicole and Mark, with their fake smiles, followed Edward to a more private area. Nicole and her husband mistakenly thought they would be heard out and followed Edward. I was curious to see how Edward would handle the situation, so I quietly followed them. Ahead, Edward was calmly and sternly reprimanding them in a low voice. It's truly disgraceful for adults to display such ugly behavior in front of children. What? But I've heard all about you two from my wife. You're probably trying to cozy up to me and promote Nicole to get some work. But who in their right mind would hire a model who stole her sister's husband through an affair? His righteous words left both Nicole and Mark speechless. Please, let's work together. We're family, after all. That's right. If we market ourselves as a showbiz family, our son Ryan could get more TV opportunities. Don't be ridiculous. Do you not know how terrible your reputation in the industry is? Not just for the affair, but for your arrogant attitude and language toward staff. There's no benefit in associating with you. Absolutely not. I refuse. Nicole's pride was deeply hurt, and she lashed out at Mark. Mark, it's your fault my reputation is so bad. You're my manager, so fix it. You worthless piece of trash. The real problem is your horrible personality. It's exhausting to support you. You're all looks and no substance. The two, dismissed by Edward, continued their ugly argument. We couldn't do anything, so we decided to take Ryan and leave. A few days later, we received a call from Nicole and her husband. They were furiously accusing us of exposing their affair. Mark and Nicole's affair is well known in the industry. Why are you yelling at me about it now? It's not just industry gossip, it's all over TV and the internet now. Who else could have leaked it but you? I told you we're done. Why would I do something like that now? They kept hurling insults at me over the phone, and I was at my wit's end. Jennifer, let me take over. Edward appeared and asked to take the phone. I handed it to him and watched what would unfold. Sorry to disappoint you, but I'm the one who leaked your affair. She had nothing to do with it. It's your own fault. Wait, really? I murmured quietly as Edward put his finger to his lips in a sure gesture. I rarely watched TV other than the shows featuring Edward and Ryan. So I hadn't realized Nicole's affair had become public knowledge and caused an uproar. Edward had secretly taken revenge on Nicole and Mark, who had made my life miserable, by exposing their affair. With a tone suggesting they should reflect on their actions, Edward ended the call. However, the phone continued to ring incessantly, so we eventually decided to block their number. Since they didn't have Edward's number, blocking them meant no further contact from them. I felt a profound sense of relief, knowing we were truly free from their toxic influence. In the end, Nicole's scandal with her manager caused her to be shunned by the modeling, magazine, and TV industries. And Mark was also fired around the same time. Nicole had been plotting to get her child into her affiliated agency and turn them into a child actor, but this dream also faded due to the scandal. The preschool, aware of the affair-turned-marriage, allowed their child to enroll, believing the child was innocent. However, this led to rumors, and Nicole and her husband's standing in the preschool's Parents Association plummeted to the lowest level. Naturally, Edward took the lead in attending the parents' meetings to spare me from encountering Nicole and her husband. According to Edward, fortunately, their child was happily unaware of the situation and was enjoying preschool life. Having lost their jobs, Nicole and her husband were now making ends meet through day labor and temporary work. Our parents, who had been living extravagantly off Nicole's earnings, also lost their retirement savings and were now working part-time despite their advanced age. All of this is entirely their own responsibility. Meanwhile, I now live happily with my kind Edward and our adorable son, Ryan. I intend to continue supporting them from behind the scenes as their loving mom, cherishing every day with my family. The first to give birth should be my daughter. Don't you dare have a child until my daughter is married. That's what Evelyn, my mother-in-law, said as she kicked my pregnant belly. Despite being a mother herself, it seems Evelyn knows nothing about him. The one who's really scary when angered isn't me. It's actually my husband, Andrew. My name is Amelia. I'm 38 years old. A cherished name given by my parents. I've always tried to live my life with positivity, but there was one time, the only time in my life, when I couldn't feel optimistic. It was back in my late 20s. When I decided to marry my now husband Andrew and visited his home for the first time. Even before going, "Be prepared, my parents are a bit odd," Andrew had warned me. But I, too carefree, thought it wouldn't be that big of a deal. "What? My parents are pretty out there too, quite the handful." That's how I responded. However, within minutes of arriving at his parents' home, I realized how naive I had been. Upon seeing me, Evelyn, my mother-in-law, frowned and said, "Bringing home some unknown woman all of a sudden, and to get married before Ella? What are you thinking, Andrew?" I was dumbfounded when Andrew suddenly got scolded. "If you keep saying that, I'll never be able to get married." And Andrew replied to Evelyn with a reluctant sigh. It turns out Evelyn had hoped that Ella, Andrew's sister, would marry before him. It's only natural for the firstborn to marry first. She had a strong fixation on this. It would make some sense if my sister-in-law Ella had a boyfriend or something. But she has barely left her room since middle school. According to Andrew, after Ella made fun of a friend's looks and turned her into a laughingstock, she herself got ostracized by her peers. She then declared, "People can't be trusted, they're the worst," and stopped going to school altogether. The problem lies with Evelyn and the late father-in-law, Samuel. They doted on Ella so much. "There's no need to go to a place with such horrible classmates. We'll support you for life." That they comforted her with. Ella took those words to heart, or rather, enjoyed them too much, and to this day, at 30, still receives an allowance from her parents, buying comics and games online to enjoy in her room. The only time she goes out is for anime events. Of course, the money for that also comes from her parents' wallets, and she doesn't work. What? What about living expenses? Of course, her parents pay for everything. Did Samuel's inheritance go to Ella? Apparently, the house caught fire several years before Samuel passed away, and most of the savings were used up in moving and other expenses. Evelyn, with hardly any assets left, refuses to work. She never gets out from her room. How Evelyn plans to continue taking care of Ella is a mystery. Anyway, Evelyn continues to spoil her. Since childhood, she doted on Ella and nearly neglected Andrew, who says, "If I wait for Ella to marry, I'll be more than just old, I'll be a skeleton." And so, Andrew had no intention of waiting for her marriage. Well, that's true. Evelyn was strongly opposed to our marriage, but Andrew had intended to marry regardless of opposition. He brought me home out of a sense of duty to report as an adult, not intending to listen to her complaints. Instead, "Well, that's the situation, so I'm getting married." He ignored Evelyn's complaints and unilaterally declared our marriage. Naturally, she vehemently refused to attend our wedding. "Don't worry, I wasn't planning on inviting you anyway." But Andrew also said. While I wondered if this was okay, I also felt that if we were to marry, there was no other way. And so, after getting married, we hardly ever returned to the in-laws' house or participated in anything like family gatherings. Evelyn herself doesn't seem to mind since she cares about Ella but not so much about Andrew. We also felt more at ease about it. But then one day, I was notified that Evelyn had collapsed at a store during shopping and was taken to the hospital by ambulance. I tried calling the in-laws' house, registered as her home number on her mobile phone, but no one answered, and it seemed our home was listed as the next contact. There's no way Ella wouldn't be at the in-laws' house. Typical of her, she probably pretending not to be home. Completely hopeless. It seems Evelyn had a myocardial infarction and needed surgery, so they were seeking familial consent. In a panic, I contacted Andrew, got his permission for the surgery, and then rushed to the hospital. Evelyn was unconscious for about 3 days after the surgery, but on the 4th day, she woke up, and by the 5th day, she was able to converse with the nurses. When we were informed by the nurses that she had been moved from the ICU to a regular room, we brought some clothes for her, but why is a stranger visiting me? What? Upon seeing me and Andrew, Evelyn didn't thank us but instead snapped at us. We didn't want to visit her either. But it's not like we have a choice when Ella wouldn't step out of the house for anything. Andrew was of the mindset that there's no need for us to visit her, was the stance. Thinking it would only cause trouble and be a hassle since we'd likely be unwelcome. But Ella refuses to go to places with lots of people like hospitals. Moreover, we had to talk through the door because she wouldn't come out of her room. Naturally, Andrew yelled, "In such an emergency, you could at least cooperate with the family. You can go to anime events, so you should be able to go to the hospital." But it had no effect. She just went silent, and the conversation ended there. So, reluctantly, we ended up visiting Evelyn in Ella's place. Andrew, infuriated by Evelyn's rudeness, told me, "You don't have to visit her anymore. Just leave her in dirty clothes every day." But that's hardly appropriate. It's a shared room, and dirty clothes would be a nuisance to the other patients and nurses. Since Andrew works during the day, I'm the only one who can bring her clothes to the hospital on weekdays. So I don't really want to, but I'll bear with it and go to the hospital, told Andrew. Andrew looked genuinely sorry. "If you ever get too fed up, just throw the clothes somewhere and run back home without going to the hospital," he said, but I thought, let's do my best as his wife. However, every time I showed up at the hospital, Evelyn would say, "The nurse said my daughter was here, and I thought it was Ella, but it's you, a stranger." She complained about not considering me her daughter, and how seeing my face made her feel worse, saying whatever she pleased. It was clear to me that this was harassment, especially since Evelyn knows very well that Ella wouldn't come to the hospital. There was even a time when she threw the things I brought at me, almost hitting another patient, and I had to apologize. Of course, she didn't apologize. I was the one who kept apologizing. With her acting however she pleased. "I don't feel like your daughter either, but I'm the only one looking after you now, so please bear with it," I retorted. Then Evelyn, "Ella would never say such a thing. You and Andrew are really not endearing," exploded. Of course, the nurses scolded us, and I had to apologize again on behalf of Evelyn, who refused to, but the situation didn't escalate further. Is there really no way to deal with this selfish Evelyn? After a stressful month, finally she was discharged. With her out of the hospital, we returned to our peaceful days, and to our joy, we found out I was pregnant. Andrew was overjoyed. It's still small and knows nothing yet. But he would come every day, pressing his ear to my belly. "Are you in there?" asking. Thinking he's silly, yet I understand his excitement and am happy he's so delighted about our child. As a mom and as a wife, I'm determined to give birth to this child healthily. My parents were also thrilled when we announced the pregnancy, and it has become their weekend joy to look for baby socks and clothes, even though we don't know the gender yet, so don't buy anything. Although I mentioned it, I'm a bit worried they might end up buying both boys' and girls' clothes anyway. In the midst of everyone being elated about the new life, we didn't tell Evelyn about the pregnancy. It was Andrew who said it would be better that way. Evelyn might start saying who knows what, being upset that her first grandchild would be my child, especially since we married before Ella. He seemed concerned about my mental well-being. I thought it might be better to report after the baby is safely born and things have settled down. Andrew believes even that isn't necessary, but I figured we'd just play it by ear depending on the situation at the time. However, as the birth approached, Evelyn suddenly showed up at our house. I was contemplating pretending not to be home to avoid showing her my pregnant belly when my mobile phone rang with a call from Evelyn. It seems she heard the ringtone through an open window, as it was summer. Evelyn raised, "Come out here, now," her voice. I usually keep my phone on silent mode, so why did I have the sound on today of all days? Cursing my luck, it was too late to do anything. With Andrew not home, I reluctantly opened the front door, and Evelyn squeezed through the slightly opened door. "Why did you get pregnant?" As soon as she saw me, Evelyn exploded in anger, not even glancing at my belly. It was as if she had known about my pregnancy from the start, leaving me dumbfounded. Then, "Some neighbor mentioned seeing you at the OBGYN, congratulating me on Andrew's wife being pregnant. What's there to celebrate?" Evelyn fumed. So, she had learned of my pregnancy through someone else. Despite choosing a hospital far from the in-laws' house, she found out anyway. Seeing my slightly pale face, Evelyn said, "It seems you do feel somewhat guilty for getting pregnant before Ella." She gave a completely off-base response. "I don't feel even a shred of such guilt. You should know, the first child to be born should be Ella's. We don't need a child from someone as shameless as you who doesn't understand family hierarchy." Evelyn then suddenly kicked my belly. Unable to protect my belly completely, I crumpled to the ground from the shock and pain of the kick. What should I do? There's no severe pain, but I felt a flow of liquid in my lower body. As I tried to flee from Evelyn, she grabbed my collar. "Understand this? The first to give birth should be Ella. Don't you dare have a child until Ella is married. Give up on giving birth." Then she kicked me in the back. I felt an uncontrollable flow of liquid from deep within me. My water broke. Evelyn continued saying other things, but in my panic, I couldn't listen, focusing solely on the emergency. Her leaving seemed like I was admitting guilt in her eyes as she spat out, "Got it now? We don't need your child." And left. Snapping back to reality at the sound of the door closing, I didn't know what to do. First, I had to check on my baby, so I called the hospital with trembling hands, rushed into a cab, and headed there. Unfortunately, Andrew was on a business trip for 2 days. His supposed supervisor had been hospitalized due to an accident, and with a shortage of staff, Andrew had to go. He tried to refuse, citing his pregnant wife, but they wouldn't listen, and he complained about it. "It's okay. I can manage on my own for a couple of days. Don't worry and just go on your business trip," I reassured him, now feeling extremely vulnerable. Tears streamed down my face from anxiety as I called Andrew, sobbing and explaining the situation. "Understood. Work doesn't matter at this point. You and the baby are what's important. I'm coming back right now, wait for me." Andrew returned by that evening, as he promised. There might have been complaints about him abandoning work. If they complain, I'm prepared to change jobs, so don't worry. But Andrew said, I'm lucky to have such a wonderful husband. Fortunately, there were no issues with the baby, but given the proximity to the due date, we immediately prepared for birth. After the child was born safely, we should have been filled with happiness, but then Andrew said seriously, just because the child was born safely doesn't mean I can forgive my mother's actions. He was still furious about Evelyn's behavior on that day. Then came the fateful day. About a month after I was discharged from the hospital. From the morning, Andrew took me and our daughter, Grace, to the in-laws' house. He didn't ring the doorbell, but instead used his key to enter. Evelyn, who appeared to have been watching TV, was startled by Andrew's. What? Why are you here all of a sudden? You should have told me you were coming. Sudden appearance. It was understandable why she panicked. The usual calmness was gone from Andrew, who didn't glare at Evelyn but entered with a cold, emotionless expression, making a loud noise as he opened the door. It was an unusually rough manner for him. Ignoring Evelyn's protests, Andrew headed straight for Ella's room. What do you think you're doing? Evelyn followed him. Andrew stopped in front of Ella's room, took a breath, and then threw his body against the door. The room had been locked at Ella's request, so breaking the door seemed the only way in. Andrew, what are you doing? Evelyn panicked. Without a word, Andrew kicked the door down. Stop it! Evelyn tried to hold him back, but Andrew brushed her off without a word. After a few kicks, the door was about to give way, and with a final charge from Andrew, it fell inward. Ella, in dirty pajamas with overgrown bangs, looked up in shock. Come here! Andrew grabbed Ella's hand and dragged her out of the room. Of course, Ella screamed. No, stop! But Andrew didn't listen. Tears filled Evelyn's eyes. Stop it! That's cruel! Evelyn sided with Ella, but her words didn't reach the furious Andrew. He threw Ella outside. Go outside for once! He shouted. Ella cried like a child, with Evelyn comforting her. Why would you do something so cruel? Evelyn raised her voice as if she were in the right. What? It's kindness. A woman over 30, not working, making her mom pay for her living expenses while cooped up in her room? That is not kindness. It's not your place to decide that. Then can mom make that decision? No, you won't. Can't you see it's unfortunate for Ella to live like this? What? After having a heart attack, you still don't get it? You won't live forever. Who will take care of Ella then? Someone who can't even look after herself. We'll leave money behind. Your concern is unnecessary. Then who took care of mom's hospitalization? Ella just stayed home. Amelia did everything. She just did it because she wanted to. It's not my concern. Yeah, but who will look after Ella if something happens to her? We won't. Or does mom plan to live another 100 or 200 years to take care of her? That's... And how is a woman who stays in her room going to get married? The first to give birth has to be Ella. Are you out of your mind? Andrew's words were too rational, leaving Evelyn looking at him in shock. She probably never thought deeply about it, believing she'd always be there to protect Ella. Excuse my frankness, I said, causing Evelyn to look at me with disdain. If you and Samuel had properly guided Ella towards social reintegration, she might have already been married by now. But Samuel, now deceased, and you, allowed Ella to live without working, fulfilling all her desires, providing a life without hardships. She is now 30. It's almost too late for her to return to society, but postponing it further won't do her any favors. Job opportunities decrease with age, and without any special circumstances or social experience, she will have limited employment options. If you truly care for her, shouldn't you encourage her to go outside instead of letting her stay cooped up at home? It's only going to make things harder for her. Evelyn's face turned red at my words. You shut up! She yelled. Think becoming a mom makes you knowledgeable? I've raised 2 kids. I know much more about parenting than you. Don't meddle in family matters. Seeing Evelyn gasping for breath in anger, Andrew scoffed. Then it's a failure in parenting. You've raised a child who stayed in her room till 30 without ever working, and 1 son who has disowned you. Let me make it clear, I do think Ella is also a victim here. Someone should have strictly corrected her when they knew the reason she started secluding herself, emphasizing it was her responsibility. It's okay, she will manage everything. Maybe it's indeed better for her to start working now, she's smart. She'll find a job soon enough, Evelyn said, patting Ella's back. However, Ella looked pale. No. Impossible. And muttered. Andrew and I both were convinced it was hopeless. Evelyn must have realized it too. As long as I'm here, you will be fine. But she put on a brave face. Humph. Well, good luck living happily with Ella, who probably won't get married in her lifetime. Just don't involve me from now on. What? Evelyn's bewildered response was met with Andrew's mocking laughter. What? You thought you'd make me take care of you when you're old, and Ella can continue living her spoiled life? You're clueless. Evelyn was at a loss for words, apparently having exactly those thoughts. Well, according to you, Ella is supposed to get married, so maybe her future husband can support both mom and her. Nice family plan there. We'll do our part by ourselves too, Andrew said mockingly, his eyes not sharing the humor. Seeing this, Evelyn looked as though she was about to say it was over, her expression filled with despair. You're thinking of disowning me? You're only mom? Only mom? Don't make me laugh. I hardly felt cared for. You made me do all the household chores while letting Ella do whatever she wanted since we were kids. And kicking Amelia's belly during her pregnancy, as if I could ever forgive you for not only attacking me but also my wife. Andrew's sharp gaze silenced Evelyn, who just stared at him. Let's go. He placed a hand on my shoulder and said. Evelyn screamed after us. Please, think it over. But he didn't look back. After that, Evelyn tried reaching out multiple times through calls and visits. Please, at least take care of Ella. But he refused. It's absurd for someone who hasn't lived properly to ask for help so easily. Rejecting her with logical reasoning and keeping her at bay. Eventually, as our children grew, we moved away, leaving no contact information for her. We've completely cut ties. The last I heard, Ella couldn't stick to vocational training and was constantly fired from part-time jobs for being late or absent without notice. Shockingly, when Ella complained about being reprimanded for her lack of enthusiasm at one part-time job, considering it harassment, Evelyn went to the supermarket where she worked and shouted at them, thinking she was pitiable. It's likely Ella will never work properly. We need to make sure she doesn't depend on us in the future. Andrew and I agreed. The prospect of Ella living properly after Evelyn's gone is dubious, but thinking about it is too scary, so we try not to. Despite Evelyn's claims of leaving money and taking care of Ella for life, she ended up struggling financially. Even past 60, she worked part-time to support Ella. It should have been the other way around. It seems she finally realized she should have encouraged Ella to go out more, but it's too late. Evelyn feels the weight of having to carry Ella, who can't do anything for herself, for the rest of her life. As for me, after our first child, we quickly had a second one, and now we're a lively family of 5. Though I was worried at first, it turns out you can manage surprisingly well. Andrew helps with childcare and cooks 3 times a week. He might actually be better at cooking than me, and his repertoire of dishes seems to be larger than mine. He's also improved his baking skills, a hobby he started on his own, and recently, it's become common to see him in the kitchen with the kids on weekends. No matter how you look at it, he's a wonderful dad. However, it seems he's not good at cleaning. He's the type to clutter things up before realizing it, thinking if things are put together, they're tidy, and he struggles to decide what to throw away. So, I mainly handle the cleaning. It's nice that we can complement each other's weaknesses. Maybe it's because they see the way we live, but our children teach each other what they're good at, helping one another with their studies. Since no one can live alone, we need to support each other. I hope our family continues to support one another forever. I'm happy every day, surrounded by such a caring family. When I told my mill I was going back to my hometown to give birth. By all means, go back. I don't want to see your face. I was delighted from the bottom of my heart as I was waiting for those words. You won't have to see me anymore, rest assured. What? I am Emily, about to turn 28. My mother died from illness when I was only 2. Since my father, a busy man, ran a clothing company with a 100-year-old tradition, I was looked after by my grandmother as he worked. My father was very strict, and I lived my life just as he told me to. Perhaps because of that, I had never dated a man, but I had given up, thinking it was destiny. After graduating from college, I worked briefly as my father's secretary at his company, but he said it was hard for him to work together and forced me to quit. I didn't get a job after that, because my father strongly stated that I don't need to work. However, my friends from university got jobs and started dating and getting married one after another, so I wanted to work too. I told my father one night, "Dad, can I work?" "No." He said one word without asking for a reason. "Why not?" "Because you don't need to work. But I also need to go out into society and gain more experience." "Emily, don't talk back." "I'm not talking back. I'm not saying anything wrong. You should just stay home, Emily. If you say that, I'll leave home. I'll leave home and go to work from there." "Emily, stop it." "No. I'm an adult. I won't always do as you say." I cried and left the place. Even in my room I cried for a long time. After a while, I called my friend from college, Lisa. "Can I come to your house now?" "Sure, but what's wrong? And can you go out at this time?" "I can't right now, but I'll figure it out. Can I stay at your place for a while?" Lisa's apartment was a luxury condominium gifted by her parents, boasting 3 rooms. "Seems like something's up." "That's fine, just be careful on your way here." Quietly, I pulled out my suitcase, packed my belongings and stealthily left the house so as not to alert my father. I left a note on my desk stating that I was going to stay with a friend. Once outside, I hailed a taxi and headed towards Lisa's apartment. Upon arriving at Lisa's apartment, I was greeted with my favorite coffee that she had prepared. "Thank you, Lisa." "What's going on, Emily?" I explained everything about the argument with my father and my subsequent departure from home. "That's awful, Emily. You've had no freedom at all." Her words brought tears to my eyes once again. "Until now, I did everything my father said and thinking it was normal. But suddenly, I've started craving my own freedom." "That's completely normal. It's strange that your father doesn't allow you to work. I'd like to meet many people and have a good time too. So does your dad know you're here? I left a note saying I was going to a friend's place, but he doesn't know any of my friends. He might be frantically searching for you right now. Maybe. It's late now. Shall we go to bed? Yeah, I am really tired. Lisa prepared a separate room for me to sleep in. The next day, Lisa left for work. When I checked my phone, I saw about 10 missed calls from my dad. I felt sorry for him and sent him an email to assure him not to worry. In the evening, after Lisa finished work, she called me. I'm going out for a drink. Why don't you join us? Having little experience with social drinking, I was excited about going out. When I arrived at the location Lisa mentioned, I found her waiting with 2 men. Sorry for keeping you waiting. So, who are these gentlemen? Pointing to the shorter man, Lisa said. This is my boyfriend. And the tall guy over there, he's single and ready to mingle. The tall man introduced himself with a refreshing smile. Nice to meet you. I'm Max, pleased to make your acquaintance. Oh, nice to meet you, I'm Emily. That's how our relationship started. Max worked at a small company in the apparel industry. For a moment, I thought it was a company similar to my father's, but I quickly dismissed the thought. Max's family was the opposite of mine, with only his mother around, but he didn't discuss the reason and I didn't ask. One day, Max said to me, I'd like to meet your father, Emily. I had been emailing my father several times since I left home, but I had no intention of going back home yet, so I didn't want to meet him. I'll think about it. But I would like to meet your mom, Max. Sure, when? Even today is fine, if you want. Really, today is fine? Then I should buy some kind of gift. Yeah, my mom loves that kind of thing. As I found out later, my MIL didn't just love that kind of thing. She got very cranky if I didn't bring those kind of things for her. On the way to Max's house, I bought a cake at a bakery. Upon arrival at Max's house, my MIL was waiting for us at the front door. When I asked Max why his mother was there, he told me he had sent her a message from the bakery. My MIL stared at me and asked, And your name is? I'm Emily. Nice to meet you. What do you do for a living? I'm currently unemployed, but I plan to work soon. Oh, so you're just idling about. How nice it must be to be a rich young lady. I'm not rich. That's why I want to work. You don't need to talk back. What do your parents do? My mother passed away when I was young. My father works at a company. Max, who had been watching my conversation with his mother from the side, said, How long are you two going to talk here? Let's go inside. Right. By the way, Max, did she bring anything? Surely she didn't come empty-handed? In a rush, I handed my MIL the paper bag containing the cake. This isn't much, but... Grabbing the bag almost violently from my hand, she peered inside and commented, I didn't really need anything, but I guess I'll take it. In the few minutes I had spent talking to my MIL, I had grown to despise her. And I felt sorry for anyone who had to call such a person MIL. Entering the living room, my MIL bombarded me with questions and I gave her only bland answers. Regardless, she continued to interrogate me relentlessly, almost as if I were a criminal suspect. Exhausted by the barrage of one-sided questions, I told Max the moment her line of questioning eased. Max, I think I should go soon. At that, my MIL's face turned red with anger. Do you really hate being with me that much? You've been giving half-hearted replies to my questions this whole time. Mom, please, calm down. Max, why on earth did you bring such a rude woman here? There must be better women out there. I snapped back at her. What about me is rude, exactly? If there's something I should improve, then tell me so I can work on it. That seemed to incense my MIL even further. You're quite cheeky, aren't you? All you have to do is answer my questions. I've been answering everything you've asked. You dislike me, don't you? I can see it in your face. I wanted to say yes, but I couldn't. I'm just tired and would like to go home. Well, aren't you audacious? I wonder what kind of education your parents gave you. They mustn't have been good parents. I would love to see what they look like. Hearing her badmouth my parents, I was overwhelmed with sadness and began to cry. Oh dear, now you're crying for sympathy. If you want to go home so badly, then go. It will be a breath of fresh air. Also, I'm going to feed this cake you brought to my dog, Charlie. But Charlie is quite a pampered pooch, so he might not eat such a cheap cake. Laughing, my MIL pointed at the cake I had bought. Mom, enough is enough. Max, you really have no eye for women. Max frowned at his mother's comment and retorted. Why are you always so argumentative? Can't you act more mature for once? Max shot back, causing his mother to lose her energy instantly. All I want is a good wife for you, Max. I get that, but I'm an adult too, you know. I'm not a kid anymore, so I can handle my own stuff. Hearing Max's words, his mother's eyes filled with tears, and she left the room. With a teary face, I decided to leave too, but Max followed me and apologized. Emily, I'm sorry for all the harsh words my mom said. She must be just jealous thinking that she's losing me to you. I'll talk to her about this, okay? Please don't let this discourage you from coming again. I'm really hurt by what your mother said about my parents, Max. I don't want to see your mother again. The moment I said that, a wave of sadness overwhelmed me, and I burst into tears, throwing myself into Max's arms. Max held me close and after a while, suggested, "How about we go somewhere now?" Barely nodding, I left the house with Max. Since Max didn't have a car, we took the train and got off at a station by the beach. We sat on a bench on the sandy beach, staring at the sea for a long time. 2 months passed since then. I found out that I was pregnant. When I consulted Max about it, he proposed. Let's get married. We don't have to have a ceremony, but we'll make it official. We can live in my house, okay? I don't make much at my job, so I can't afford to rent an apartment. I'll make sure to talk to my mom about not saying unnecessary things to you, Emily. Living with his mother wasn't ideal for me, but there was no other place to live. Okay, I'll try my best to get along with your mother. Thus, I ended up living with my MIL. Because I was getting married, I went back home to tell my father about it. He looked delighted when he saw me. It's good to see you looking well. I know we've been in touch, but it's been a while since I last saw you. I'm sorry, Dad. I have something important to tell you. My father's expression changed immediately. I told him about my encounter with Max, my pregnancy, and our plan to get married. My father listened silently. When I finished, he simply said, "Well, congratulations. Can't wait to meet my grandchild." His smile looked forced. Dad, thank you. I'm sorry for bringing such sorrow as a daughter, I said as tears flowed down my face. My dad was also crying. I expected him to be angry, but his gentle words hurt me even more. I ended up moving into my MIL's house. Lisa, who had been taking care of me ever since I left my home, said to me, "You better show me your cute baby's face soon." Yeah, of course. And you should get married soon, too. I want to get married soon too, but he just won't make up his mind. But I think it'll work out somehow. Let's go out for dinner together again. I planned to move on Sunday, but my MIL said it was a bad luck day, so I changed it to Saturday. The move was completed safely on Saturday morning. While the movers were carrying my belongings, my MIL just stood there, watching them. She was repeatedly told by the movers to step back because it was dangerous, but she wouldn't move. When the move was over, my MIL called me over and said, "You didn't give them what they're supposed to get, right?" I didn't understand. Huh? It seemed she misunderstood me pretending not to know, and she went away and handed something to the leader of the movers. Seeing that, I understood what she was saying but when she came back to me, she said, "Emily dear, it seemed like you didn't want to part with your money, so I gave it for you. Of course, you'll pay me back later." She then told me an absurd amount of money. It was way beyond what was generally considered reasonable, so I said, "You gave them that much? Oh dear, was that bad?" "It's not bad, but I think the amount was a little too much." It's the thought that counts in these situations. If you skimp, you'll be cursed. I'm not saying I'm skimping. I didn't say anything more because I knew it would lead to another argument. My MIL had this face saying, "I'm right no matter what you say." That's when Max showed up and said to my MIL, "Mom, what's up? What did you say to Emily?" "Just nothing." My MIL replied succinctly, then walked off. "You okay?" "I told her not to mess with you, you know." "Thanks." Deciding not to mention to Max that I almost had another argument with my MIL. I knew if I did, he might mention it to her, causing her to grow even more hostile towards me. After moving in, my MIL barely spoke to me, obviously avoiding me. There were even weeks where she wouldn't utter a word to me, and those days were bliss. One day, Max brought home some work documents in an envelope. It was marked with a company name, Star Textiles Inc., and that made me gasp. That was a name I had heard many times during my time working for my dad's company. They were one of our subcontractors. I asked Max, "Is this your company's envelope?" "Yeah, why?" "I was just wondering. I just realized that I didn't know much about your company." I didn't tell him that his company was a subcontractor to my father's. For some reason, I felt it was better not to say anything. "Well, we're just a small subcontractor. If our parent company decided to drop us, we'd go bankrupt instantly and all the employees would lose their jobs." Max laughed with his wistful look. About a month later, Max started coming home late from work. He also seemed down, so I asked him, "You've been coming home late recently. Is something wrong? You don't seem yourself." He admitted and said, "The company's in trouble." "What, like going bankrupt?" Max nodded. "The parent company suddenly decided to cut our orders by half. Now, our boss is begging them every day to continue business as usual. We're also looking for new clients, but if neither of those things work out, we're going bankrupt." As I listened to Max's story, I thought about asking my dad to help Max's company. But my father is strict about his work, so he would never help a business partner out of personal feelings. For some reason, the number of business partners must have been halved. I told him that my father's company is the parent company of Max's. Max was surprised at first, but then told me with a twinkle in his eyes, "Emily, please. Beg your father not to reduce his business with us." "I'm sorry, Max. My father is strict in business. He would never make such a decision based on personal matters. Could you at least try, Emily? It won't help. As I said this, Max got down on his knees before me.
Please, I beg you.
Stop it, Max, don't do this. I'll talk to my father, but I know it won't make a difference. As Max raised his head, tears of relief streamed down his face. That night, I called my father and explained Max's desperate plea. So, the company Max works for is Star Textiles. I guess I have to help them then. I was surprised. I had expected my father, with his strict business mindset, to refuse outright. But I have two conditions. First, I will continue to do business with Star Textiles as before, but I want Max to leave that company and work for mine. Second, you and Max will move in with me. Is that acceptable?
So, you're saying Max should transfer to your company? I'll talk to him about that. But why do you want us to live with you?
My father answered, sounding a bit uncomfortable. I just want my daughter close by. Okay. But why did you decide to reduce your dealings with Star Textiles in the first place? A new company approached us with a very attractive proposal, so we decided to do business with them. But after some research, we found that they have a history of breaking promises, so we were planning to call off the deal.
So, even if I hadn't asked, Star Textiles would have been fine?
Maybe. My father laughed, and I couldn't help but laugh too. After hanging up, I immediately relayed the conditions my father had proposed to Max. He was relieved that Star Textiles was no longer in jeopardy, but he seemed hesitant about moving to my father's company. It's hard for me to consider working for your father's company, Emily. I've always worked hard at Star Textiles, and I have a lot of good colleagues. I'll tell my father what you said. I called my father again, and when I relayed what Max had said, my father responded. He indeed said that, huh? He's a responsible, good man. Got it. He can keep doing his best at Star Textiles. But I'm not backing down about you guys moving into my house.
Understood.
After the phone call, Max was overjoyed when I told him what my dad had said. I told Max, just remember, don't let your mother know about my father's company. If she finds out, she'll start nagging again.
Right, got it.
Several weeks later, I decided to go back home for the birth of our child. Even though it's just my father and elderly grandmother at home, it's way better than being taken care of by my MIL. I waited until my MIL was having her afternoon tea in the living room, and I approached her. MIL, about my childbirth, I've decided to go back home. It's just my dad and my grandmother, but my grandma is still very active and full of energy. When I said this, my MIL looked at me with hateful eyes and said, by all means, go back. I don't want to see your face. I didn't feel anything when my MIL said this, as I had anticipated it.
You won't have to see me anymore, so rest easy. What? I mean, I won't be coming back here anymore. And soon, Max will be moving to my parents' house as well. What are you talking about? Max is too busy with work to move. It's okay now.
At that moment, Max came in and said to his mother,
Mom, my company is going to be okay now. Emily helped me. What are you talking about? Emily's dad is the owner of my company's parent company. What?
Hearing this, my MIL raised her voice and stared at me for a while before saying,
Emily, I had no idea you were the daughter of the owner of the parent company of Max's. I've been very rude to you up until now.
My MIL bowed deeply.
It's okay now. May I ask you for a favor? I'd like to live together at your parents' house as well.
Mom, no. You can stay here.
Yeah, I don't want to live with you, MIL. I'd be reminded of all the things you've said to me up until now. I won't say anything else, please, I beg you.
My MIL said with tears in her eyes. I know it seems cold, but that's not possible. Then, my MIL got on her knees, bowed her head to the floor, and pleaded.
Please, I don't want to live without Max. Please. No, I can't.
Mom, stop it. If you had been kind to Emily before, we could have lived together. But your past behavior has led to this. Give it up. I told my MIL, who continued to shed tears on the floor.
Well, MIL, you brought this on yourself.
Half a year later, Max, our newborn daughter Kay, and I visited my MIL's house. However, the house was void of any human presence, and the air was chillingly cold. Max was calling out loudly to his mother, but there was no response.
Max, did you mention we were coming over? No, I thought it'd be a surprise.
I wonder where she is. Just then, my MIL, who had become severely emaciated, came out of the bathroom. Even upon seeing us, she did not change her expression. The kitchen was piled high with remnants of instant noodles and dirty dishes were left stacked.
Mom, are you okay?
My MIL glanced at Max, but said nothing. MIL, we brought your favorite cake. As I held out the cake, my MIL rushed towards me, snatched the cake, and began devouring it immediately. I repeated what I had said before.
Well, MIL, you brought this on yourself.
Because it's already decided. This was my husband Connor's catchphrase. Our in-laws' house doubles as a home office for a construction business, with Connor and my father-in-law Mason often out on cable installation jobs during the day, leaving the house empty. My name is Emma. I used to work as an accounting clerk at a certain company, but recently, my mother-in-law Olivia started making mistakes with invoice numbers and payment recipients due to her farsightedness. So, I quit my job to live and handle the accounting at the in-laws' house. The arrangement was supposed to be that Olivia would take over the household chores in exchange, but in reality, she started spending her newfound free time on hobbies and stopped doing any housework at all. I have a daughter, Sophia, who's in elementary school, so avoiding chores like cleaning and cooking wasn't an option for me. Reluctantly, I ended up taking on all the household duties since I was home the most. Thanks to you, Emma, I can take it easy. I really appreciate it. Olivia would say this with a light thanks, but whenever I asked her to take out the trash or if she had gathered the newspapers to throw away, she'd complain of a bad back and wouldn't lift a finger. I kept thinking, your only issue is supposed to be your eyesight, as I ended up doing everything myself. Maybe my attitude let the entire in-laws think they could get away with anything. Connor and Olivia started to ask me for various favors after the fact.
Oh, Emma. From next week for 2 weeks, we're taking care of the grandkids, so I'm counting on you.
This was suddenly announced at the dinner table, and I was taken aback.
Olivia, which grandkids?
When I asked for clarification, Olivia calmly replied,
Amelia's kids. You know, school's out for summer next week. Her kids love the pool, and they've been nagging about going every day. We have a pool nearby, so Emma, you take them, okay? What?
I must have looked puzzled. Olivia lectured me with a stern look.
Amelia, she always hated swimming. It would be cruel to make her accompany her kids to a pool she dislikes every day. It's fine if you goes with them. Amelia has been having a tough time since she got married. We want to make things a bit easier for her when she comes back home.
I was irked at being inconvenienced, but thought that if my sister-in-law Amelia was coming, maybe having her clean or cook occasionally would lighten my load a bit. So, I reluctantly agreed, forgetting about her personality. Once back at the in-laws' house, Amelia began to treat me almost like a housekeeper. On the first day of summer break, she arrived and said,
"Here, a souvenir,"
and handed me a bag full of contents.
"Amelia, what's this?"
As I opened the bag and saw it was filled with clothes, I asked. Amelia looked at me and said,
"Clothes for laundry. I thought I'd have them washed at my parents' home. With 2 kids, laundry piles up. Make sure to wash them soon so we don't run out of clothes to wear,"
she said rapidly, and then left for Olivia and Mason's place. "What is this? I'm not a housekeeper." I was about to protest, but lost the will when I saw Amelia chatting happily with Mason. I figured any complaints would just be defended by Olivia. I thought, it's just for 2 weeks, I can endure it, but never imagined Connor would betray me too. As I scrambled with the breakfast preparations for the suddenly increased number of people, the doorbell rang early in the morning. Wondering who could it be this early, I went to the door and found my brother-in-law Matthew and his wife Charlotte, with their son Liam in tow. Without a greeting, Charlotte pushed Liam forward and said,
"So, we'll be leaving him with you for 2 weeks. We're off to the sea for diving, so we might be hard to reach by phone. Just text us if you need anything."
Leaving Liam behind, Matthew and Charlotte made to leave, but I hurriedly stopped them. What do you mean, leaving him with me? I haven't been informed about this." Charlotte looked irritated, but Matthew tilted his head slightly and enlightened me.
"Huh? Didn't Connor tell you? Amelia's dropping off her kids, and he suggested your place too. I was worried it'd be too much trouble, but Connor said having 2 or 3 makes no difference."
I blurted out in frustration.
"There's no way that's okay. It's troubling to have you show up unannounced like this."
Then, from behind, a voice said,
"Ah, they're here. Good. Leave Liam here. In return, bring back some liquor as a souvenir."
Connor didn't look at me, only speaking to Matthew and Charlotte. Matthew and Charlotte, ignoring me just the same, started speaking. "We appreciate it. You can count on Connor. Thanks in advance," Charlotte said in a sweet voice, then Matthew.
"Connor does love his liquor. Thanks, we'll leave it to you."
Laughed, waved his hand, and quickly got into the car and drove off. Connor, fond of liquor, seemed to have agreed to take Liam in exchange for some. Shocked by the situation, I forgot Liam was there and couldn't help but confront Connor.
"Hey, what's this about? Why did you tell Matthew we could take him without asking?"
But Connor seemed genuinely clueless about why I was angry. "Why are you so mad? It doesn't make a difference whether it's 3 kids or 4. Sophia will be happy to have plenty of playmates during summer break." He was saying this as if 3 active boys and the quiet Sophia could play together as equals. There was much I wanted to say, but seeing Liam standing there, looking forlornly in the direction Matthew and Charlotte had gone, I couldn't bring myself to complain any further. Connor, wanting to avoid further discussion,
"It's already decided,"
said curtly and went inside the house. Reluctantly, I took Liam by the hand and welcomed him into the in-laws' house. The 2 weeks taking care of 3 nephews were hellish. From morning to night, I was in the kitchen, trying to satisfy the appetites of growing boys. I tried several times to get Amelia to take over, but she refused to budge from in front of the TV. If I persisted, I ended up being scolded by Olivia. "Amelia is always exhausted from taking care of her 2 boys. Let her be treated as a guest while she's here." Mason and Connor nodded along with Olivia's words, leaving me without allies. But Amelia's kids were brothers, so they managed to entertain themselves, which was somewhat of a relief. The real trouble was Matthew's son, Liam. Liam, envious of Amelia's kids for having their mom around, didn't dare act up because they were older and would retaliate. Presumably with that in mind, Liam started taking out his frustration on Sophia in secret. Moreover, he was secretly being mean to Sophia, so I was completely unaware of it. I was too busy with the accounting work for our business, meals, laundry, and supervising trips to the pool to notice, but that's no excuse. Sophia confided in me about Liam's bullying the following year, after Olivia and Connor announced at dinner that they would be taking in the nephews again.
Amelia says she's counting on us for this summer again. She wants her kids taken to the pool like last year. Also, she wants to go on a trip with just the ladies during the summer break. So I'll be traveling with her. Mason will be away for a couple of days, okay?
Olivia discussed taking in the nephews without seeking my agreement, oddly turning the conversation to Mason. Mason, his face flushed from the evening's drinks. "Have a good trip," smiled and said. As I sat there, dreading a repeat of last year's pool and home routine.
Oh, I forgot to mention Matthew too. They want to go on a diving trip abroad this time, just the two of them,
Connor added. I glared at Connor in irritation, but as usual,
"It's already decided,"
he simply said. As I was resigning myself to another 2 weeks of endurance, I noticed something was off with Sophia sitting next to me. She had stopped eating, was looking down, pale, and trembling. "What's wrong, Sophia? Are you feeling okay?" "No, it's nothing." She clearly wasn't okay. But Sophia, like me, tends to bear with unpleasant things in front of others. Knowing this about Sophia, I went to her room after dinner to talk, and by the time we finished, my face was red with anger.
"Sophia, is that true? Liam did that to you at the pool?"
When I asked, Sophia, her eyes brimming with tears, nodded. "Yes, Mom. When we go to the pool, Liam always clings to me, pinching my back and bottom. Even when I tell him it hurts and to stop, he doesn't." I must have been so distracted by Amelia's noisy kids that I neglected to keep a closer watch on Sophia. Sophia added, as I regretted not noticing at all. "Even when we come back from the pool, he enters my room without permission and roughly plays with my dolls. He doesn't stop even when I ask him to." I remembered sewing back the arm of a teddy bear I found almost torn off while cleaning her room, thinking I'd have to remind Sophia to be careful. I never realized that was Liam's doing. "Mom, I don't want to spend another summer vacation with Liam or Amelia's kids. They both try to make me write their diaries." I recalled Amelia expressing her relief when leaving our house.
"I'm so glad the boys finished their homework."
Was happy. Sophia is mature and smart beyond her years, but even so, to have a younger child do their homework is unacceptable. I deeply regretted thinking it was enough just to endure it myself. Because I kept silent and resigned, Sophia ended up suffering even more. Looking into Sophia's reddened eyes, I made a promise.
"This summer vacation, I won't let Liam or Amelia's kids hurt you ever again. Trust me, okay?"
Hugging Sophia, I resolved to protect her this time for sure. Connor, with his habit of saying "it's already decided," was unreliable. With that in mind, I made a call, hoping for help. And on the day before summer vacation, Sophia and I quietly packed and called a cab right after breakfast.
"Oh. A cab? How odd, did Amelia and the others arrive a day early?"
Olivia wondered aloud, to which I cheerfully responded.
"That was me who called it. This summer, Sophia and I decided to spend at my parents' home. So, that's that."
As Sophia and I headed for the door, a flustered Connor chased after us.
Emma, what are you doing? Who's going to look after the nephews when they arrive? You took them in last year. Why change your mind now?
Frustrated, I retorted.
You say took them in, but it was after the fact, wasn't it? I never agreed to it.
To Connor's complaints, I had only one thing to say.
We're spending it at my parents' home.
It's already decided. With that, we quickly got into the cab and headed straight for my parents' home. My parents welcomed Sophia and me warmly. Sophia, glad you could come. I made pudding, want some? My mom offered, and my dad added.
Sophia prefers chips over pudding, right? How about going to buy some with Grandpa?
He tries to take her out with a sweet face. Olivia and Mason, who doted on the nephews, made Sophia feel cherished for the first time in a while. After she went to bed, I explained the whole situation to my parents. I had briefed them when I decided we'd return to my parents' home, but now I felt the need to share everything to ensure they'd be on our side if Olivia or Connor tried to take us back. The guilt of not noticing Sophia's suffering spilled over as I talked.
Emma, don't be so hard on yourself. It's understandable you didn't notice with all the care you were providing to those boys every day.
Mom comforted me, but Dad's reaction was different. Fond of Sophia, Dad was genuinely angry for the first time in a while.
That's right. It's not your fault. Olivia and Connor, who dumped all the childcare on you, are to blame too. They should have noticed Sophia's unhappiness. Right?
Connor, perhaps influenced by Olivia or simply insensitive, often told me he wished for a son over a daughter. I figured he wouldn't have done anything even if Sophia had complained about Liam's bullying. While talking with my parents, my mobile phone rang. Expecting it to be either Olivia or Connor, I answered the phone. Sure enough, it was Olivia, who angrily said,
Emma, what's this about leaving the household chores and running off to your parents' home as Connor's wife? Come back first thing tomorrow morning, understood?
Olivia's shrill voice seemed to be heard by my parents nearby, as they frowned. Suddenly, Dad grabbed my mobile phone and started talking to Olivia.
I can't stay silent on this. You say as Connor's wife, but doesn't Amelia have a husband too? Yet, when she visits her parents' home, you insist Emma treats her like a guest, allowing her to relax. But you're saying she doesn't have the same right?
Olivia, caught off guard by my dad's sharp retort, stuttered.
Well, that's not. I mean, then what do you mean?
You could almost see Olivia scrambling for words on the other end. As my mom and I exchanged looks and chuckled, it seemed Olivia handed the phone to Connor nearby.
I'm sorry, but the nephews are coming over tomorrow, and there's nobody to look after them during the day. Could you at least ask Emma to come back?
Connor's request left me feeling disappointed inside. So, they were planning to dump the babysitting on me after all. Connor and Olivia probably didn't want to admit to Amelia and Matthew that they couldn't take the nephews after all. Dad was unyielding in his response to Connor.
So, you made a promise and now you want to leave everything to Emma? Besides, aren't Olivia and Amelia at your house? What are they doing all day?
Connor mumbled something indistinct. Of course. He couldn't admit to spending the day watching TV or out at classes in this situation. Dad cheerfully offered a solution.
Well, if you're in trouble, I can't ignore it. They're relatives, after all, Amelia and Matthew's kids. I'll handle it,
Dad said with a mischievous grin. Knowing Dad, Mom and I understood he was up to something, but Connor took his words at face value. Thinking Dad would convince me to return to the in-laws' house.
Thank you, please do,
Connor repeated before hanging up. The rest of the story comes from what Dad told us about his 2 weeks at the in-laws' house. Dad showed up early in the morning at the in-laws' house, claiming to be my replacement, and got everyone up for morning exercises. Dad was a former middle school PE teacher, known for handling students with tough behavior, leading both physical education and disciplinary actions for years. With a stern face and a commanding voice, Dad had Mason and Connor following orders, trembling. Even when Amelia and Matthew arrived, Dad didn't flinch, lining the kids up in the yard for exercise. Charlotte tried to complain, but Dad loudly proclaimed,
"What business do you have leaving children behind for an overseas trip?"
His voice echoed so loudly that she quickly left, probably worried about the neighbors' opinions. After ordering Olivia to make breakfast, Dad took the children to the park for a 2-kilometer run. Coaxing reluctant kids,
"If you don't do this, I won't take you to the pool,"
Dad said, and he reluctantly ran.
"You have a growing child, so you should include more vegetables and protein."
And making sure they ate everything without complaints. Connor and Mason didn't defend Olivia but quietly ate and seemed to rush off to work. While gathering the kids for homework, telling Amelia to clean and do laundry.
"Why do you have to come to your parents' home and do that? It's not a joke."
Amelia refused and complained to Dad, saying, letting the kids catch bugs at the park after a run. And how leaving sweaty, muddy clothes and bug eggs around would invite trouble. Bug-hating Amelia screamed and went to get the vacuum. This way, Dad seemed to be training the in-laws hard. Starting the morning with exercise, studying in the cool morning, not allowing playtime in the pool but making them do laps, improving all the kids' swimming times. Liam had no time for mischief, focusing solely on swimming. After summer, the kids were tanned and looked sharp, while all adults were worn out. During summer, I ignored SOS messages from Connor, not replying because they didn't reflect on their actions. Only asking for Dad to leave or for me to return for their convenience. Since the parents said it's okay to stay at the parents' home indefinitely, I decided not to return to the in-laws' house to protect Sophia's smile. I hope Connor realizes his mistakes soon, but if not, divorce is the only option. Fortunately, my former workplace has contacted me about returning, so supporting Sophia alone after divorce won't be an issue. Looking at Sophia playing with the parents, I felt it was good not to endure this summer. My name is Scarlett. While jogging around the neighborhood, I witnessed Mom scattering ashes from an urn with my name on it, calling out my name. Currently living with my Aunt Hannah due to various reasons. I had grievances against Mom but chose peace over revenge. However, seeing Mom cry out, "Why did God take Scarlett away?" brought back painful memories, prompting me to appear before her. Relatives looked shocked, and Mom turned pale, mumbling in confusion since they thought I was dead.
What?
In confusion. Because here I am, alive and well, when she thought I was gone. To Mom, I said,
"Are you doing all this just to get attention and sympathy from people? Or wait, this bone is fake, right? It's because of stuff like this that you ended up in jail and yet you never learn."
And with that, I walked away, leaving her behind. Behind me, I could hear Mom being grilled by relatives.
"Scarlett is alive, isn't she? What's going on?"
I thought she was always sick, but she looked so healthy. It felt incredibly satisfying. The old mom used to take me to cute cafes and popular parks, dress me in cute clothes, and do my hair in cute styles. She was also conscious about eating organic, so our meals were always more stylish and expensive than most families. Up to this point, she seemed like a wonderful mom. But on social media, she pretended to be the perfect mom with a wonderful family, while in reality, she did the opposite. When she took photos of me outside, she would say,
"I don't want your clothes to get dirty or for you to get a weird tan. It would decrease your value. Let's go home."
She forced me home. When we went to a cafe, after taking a photo of me with a cake, she'd say,
"Eating something so high in calories will make you obese."
And we'd leave without eating the cake she ordered. At home, she'd pretend we were eating organic by transferring supermarket deli food into fancy dishes and posting it as homemade. Dad couldn't stand her obsession with social media and disappeared when I was young, leaving me in a fatherless home. Mom was supposed to be a housewife on social media, but in reality, she was juggling several part-time jobs. Still, she clung to living in a fancy high-rise apartment for the likes of social media, making me struggle daily for food. While she played the role of a kind mom online, away from the camera, our home was a mess, and she hardly took care of me or the house. When I tried to talk to her because I wanted her attention, she'd say, "I'm busy with social media now. Don't talk to me. Actually, don't come near me. It's creepy." She treated me like a nuisance. Back then, I just wanted her praise, turning myself into a doll for her social media. Living like this, I was quickly pointed out at my school's health examination for being too small. It made sense since the most nutrition I got was from school lunches, given the lack of decent meals at home. Mom and I had to see a nutritionist. Where she? "To be honest, I've been hiding this from the school, but Scarlett has always been frail. She once was hospitalized for a heart condition, then developed asthma. It was tough. She's only just started to move around recently, so could we maybe watch her condition a bit longer?" Tearfully claimed. For the record, I've never had heart disease or asthma, nor was I particularly sickly. But the nutritionist, seeing Mom's tears, believed every word. "That must have been hard for you." And with sympathy, she spoke kindly to Mom. At that moment, while Mom was covering her face with her hands and sobbing, to me, it looked like she was clearly laughing. Looking back, she probably felt good about being seen as a diligent mother nursing her sick daughter by the nutritionist. After that, Mom started doing various things to make me sick. Not feeding me was just the beginning. She would douse me in cold water while I was naked, pull out my hair, and keep me from sleeping to weaken my body. Despite my pleas to stop, Mom would say,
"You just need to do as I say. Not listening makes you a bad child."
And inflicted violence where it couldn't be seen. On social media, Mom began playing the role of the unfortunate mother with a sick daughter, saying, "My daughter has an unidentified illness. I'm doing everything I can for her, but she's not getting better." And started asking for donations to help me. After the donations apparently went well, Mom quit her job one day. During the day, she clung to me.
"You're sick. It's an incurable disease,"
chanting. Naturally, I couldn't go to school anymore, and that's when I truly felt my life was in danger. The one who saved me was Hannah. Hannah had always been worried about Mom's addiction to social media. So, she often admonished Mom, saying,
"Stop just trying to look good on social media, and take a good look at Scarlett."
But Mom never accepted Hannah's words. Just in case, Hannah kept an eye on Mom's social media. When she saw a post about me having a strange illness, Hannah contacted Mom.
"Is Scarlett okay? I want to visit her,"
saying, "But Mom, don't come over, it would be a nuisance. Scarlett has a disease that gets worse if she meets anyone other than me," replied to Hannah. Afterward, feeling something was off, Hannah decided to visit our house. When Hannah arrived, it happened to be when Mom was out shopping. Though Mom had told me never to answer the door even if the bell rang, I couldn't help but cry out from my bed when I knew it was Hannah.
I'm hungry, help me!
Shouting. Hearing that, Hannah instructed me to unlock the door, so I desperately unlocked the front door. Seeing my condition, Hannah was in tears and speechless. After all, I was extremely thin from being fed very little by Mom, hadn't been allowed to shower, and wasn't even allowed to go to the toilet, so I was in diapers. Shocked by the bizarre scene, Hannah immediately called the police and an ambulance. Later, as I was being taken to the hospital by the ambulance, Mom returned from shopping and tried to take me back, saying,
"Give Scarlett back. I need her. She's sick. She needs to be cared for at home, not at the hospital."
But she was restrained by the police who arrived later. Afterwards, hospital tests revealed severe malnutrition and several broken ribs. Conversely, none of the incurable diseases Mom had mentioned on social media were found. Since then, I hadn't seen Mom. I remember bursting into tears from the emotion of eating a proper meal for the first time in a long time at the hospital. Continuing with meals and rehabilitation, I was discharged from the hospital. When I was discharged, it wasn't Mom who came to pick me up, but Hannah. Since then, I've been living with Hannah, her husband, and their children. At first, having been through so much with Mom, I was full of anxiety about living with strangers, but Hannah's family was very warm, and I quickly became close to them as family. Especially Hannah, who scolded and praised me like her own daughter. I admired her like a real mom. But sometimes, I wondered how Mom was doing, yet I couldn't bring myself to ask. Remembering her would bring back too many memories and nearly send me into a panic. Hannah never talked to me about Mom either, so before I knew it, about 10 years had passed. When I got into the university I had hoped for and was about to start living on my own, I finally mustered the courage to ask Hannah about Mom. Hannah was a bit surprised when I asked about Mom, but then she didn't hide what had happened to her. Mom was taken away by the police for not feeding me and likely causing my fractures through violence. Later, she was charged with assault and other crimes and ended up in prison for about 3 years. At first, "When I get out, I'll live with Scarlett again. We'll be happy this time," she said. But while in prison, she fell in love with a male guard, it seems, and said, "I've found new happiness. Scarlett will just be in the way now, so I'll give her up," and relinquished her parental rights. So when Mom was released, she disappeared without coming to pick me up. Thanks to that, even after Mom was released, I could continue to stay with Hannah. Of course, I felt hatred towards Mom, but more than that, I decided it was better to enjoy my life now with Hannah and her family, who saved me, and I stopped bringing up Mom. Years into my university studies, living with my feelings towards Mom sealed away, I encountered the scene mentioned earlier. Remembering my resentment towards Mom, I couldn't help but speak up. I'm surprised I didn't lash out physically. Mom's relatives knew what she had done to me, so the relatives I encountered with Mom earlier were from my disappeared dad's side. The relatives seemed to not recognize me at first when I spoke to Mom. But I have a birthmark on my forehead that's usually covered by my bangs. When I showed it, the relatives who knew me realized immediately that I was Scarlett. I don't know whose bone Mom had, but I decided I didn't want any further involvement with her. A few days later, Dad's relatives contacted Hannah's house, asking if she knew Mom's whereabouts. Naturally, Hannah didn't know where Mom was and said so, but at that time, she was told about Mom's recent strange behavior by the relatives. Apparently, Mom had been telling Dad's relatives for a while that Scarlett has contracted an incurable disease and doesn't have long to live. I need financial support for her treatment so she can live a little longer. With the demeanor of an actress as usual. Mom originally hated Dad, who had disappeared, so she had never tried to interact with Dad's relatives. So, when Mom came begging, the relatives were very shaken. But feeling guilty over Dad abandoning his wife and child and disappearing, they ended up supporting her with a total of about $100,000. Again, I have never had an incurable disease. Despite receiving the money, Mom wouldn't even allow them to visit me, gradually increasing the relatives' suspicion towards her. The next step Mom took was to pretend that I had died. Thinking that if I was gone from this world, the relatives couldn't complain, she later reported to them that I had passed away. Mom claimed she wanted a funeral with just the two of us and reported back to the relatives after finishing the ceremony. The relatives, though somewhat suspicious of Mom, attended my scattering ceremony, thinking she wouldn't fake cremains. During the scattering, Mom was sobbing. "We used to play together by this river. So, I wanted her to be free here in the end." Saying, "For the record, I have no memory of playing with Mom by that river." But Mom's acting convinced the relatives, and some were moved to tears, sympathizing with her. Then, as if I had descended from heaven, I appeared, revealing Mom's lie, and the relatives demanded their money back. However, Mom escaped from the relatives' questioning and has since disappeared. So now, the relatives are looking for anyone who knows about Mom, which is why they contacted Hannah. After hearing the relative's story,
Given that you've run into Scarlett now, she might come looking for you. I think you should move to a more secure place as soon as possible,"
Hannah said to me. Even though I had just moved in not too long ago, to avoid meeting Mom again, I decided to move to an apartment farther away. Having finished packing and feeling hungry, I went out to buy some food. On my way, I heard an eerily high voice.
"Scarlett, I've finally found you."
Slowly turning around, there was Mom with a sleazy smile. The Mom I knew always kept herself well-groomed and looked younger than other moms of my classmates, but the Mom standing before me now looked emaciated, making her seem about 60 years old, though she should only be around 45. Then, without being asked, Mom began to talk about her current situation. While in prison, Mom had fallen in love with a guard, but after being rejected and still nursing her broken heart, she was released. She had wanted to come to pick me up right after getting out, but she didn't know where Hannah's house was, and those who knew about Mom's case wouldn't tell her. Wandering the streets at night in despair, Mom stumbled upon a pub and ended up going inside. There, she got to drinking with a man in the pub who
"Had a hard time, didn't you?" "You did well,"
offered her kind words, fulfilling her need for validation, and she became infatuated with him. Subsequently, Mom contributed money to the man, accruing debt. Realizing she was in trouble, Mom concocted a plan to claim I was sick and extort money from Dad's relatives, whom she despised. Her plan seemed to be working until I interfered, and now she was living a life on the run from the relatives she had deceived. After sharing her story, "Since you ruined my plan, it's your responsibility to hide me. You're an adult now, right? Think of it as repaying me, and work from morning to night to support me." Mom made an outrageous request. Moreover, Mom was utterly confident I wouldn't refuse her request, which was truly disgusting. So,
"The only mom I have is Hannah, not you, so forget about getting any favors from me,"
I told her. Then, filled with anger, Mom retorted,
"It's your fault I've been unhappy all this time. Who do you think raised you to be this big?"
as she tried to lunge at me, hurling insults. Fortunately, there were other people around who quickly restrained her as a dangerous person. Thanks to a bystander who called the police, Mom was taken away by the authorities. Afterward, I reported what had happened to Hannah, who immediately informed Dad's relatives that Mom had been found. Thanks to that, Mom was caught by Dad's relatives. They tried to sue her to get their money back, but it had all been spent on dates with the man, leaving almost nothing. So, the relatives forced Mom, much to her dismay, to take on debt to repay them. Finding no choice but to borrow from illegal lenders due to her unemployment, leaving her to pay off her debts with high interest by working nights. Because of this, I can enjoy my university life without fear of being threatened by Mom. Rumor has it that Scarlett surely won't ignore me in this dire situation. She will come to rescue me. Mom still laments. But I no longer think of Mom as my mother, so I won't be coming to get her.